That'd be cool. Yeah, but they're from here too. I mean, they have actually submitted yeah.
All right, at 6 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Can we have a report on the closed session?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The council met in closed session for the reasons posted on the agenda, and by a 3-2 vote has determined that the appeal of the 2004 use permit pertinent to the cheese factory will be scheduled before the appeal regarding the 2018 use permit, and that will take place, the appeal hearing will take place on June 3. The vote was 3-2 with Councilmember Cook and the mayor dissenting. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we need to have another roll call or no? No. All right, great. I would like to ask my neighbor, Norman Cram, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge my allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And can I have a approval of the agenda? If anyone has any changes to the agenda, please make it now. Otherwise,
Move to approve the agenda.
second roll call.
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte. Aye. Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
And I know there's some meeting dedications, and so I will start to my right. Councilmember Cook. Oh, God. Oh, it's in a different order on my agenda. Sorry. No. Sorry, I have a little typo on my agenda. We will actually start with public comment. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating and spelling your name and giving your address.
Ken Brown, BROWN, 1396 in the city of Sonoma. It's beautiful on Friar Creek. Sonoma Patient Group, my wife's dispensary in Santa Rosa, is having a cannabis seminar for seniors and their caregivers this Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, from noon to 2 p.m. at the Sonoma Valley Library. The featured presenter is Dr. Marilyn Holter, a Harvard-trained, board-certified anesthesiologist with 40 years of practice. She's in the 8th year of medicinal cannabis consulting and has seen over 15,000 patients. She is a marvelous speaker, and you learn a lot, and the library is a wonderful place to have this meeting. So I hope that you all come out and check it out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ken.
Good evening. My name is David Morell. It's spelled M-O-R-E-L-L, 483 Mall Court, City of Sonoma. I'm here both as a citizen, but more importantly this evening as a commissioner on the City of Sonoma Community Services and Environment Commission. I'm joined by my colleague who will speak next after me within our 3-minute rules, because we are here with a quarterly update to the Climate Change Action Plan, which is part of the overall work plan for the year of the CSEC, Environment and Community Services Commission. So we've been asked and in some sense required by action item 4 of a 8-item work plan to give quarterly updates. And rather than put it on the agenda and get through all of that, we just thought we'd come in public. And if that, for our first update, if that works best, fine. If not, and we want to agendize it 3 months or so from now, we'll work with the council and the manager to make that happen. Because we have a lot to cover, what I've done is bring a brief 4-page statement. I have a number of copies which we can circulate to the council and staff and give a brief update. Basically, the work plan calls for us to be working with the city staff and council members as appropriate to be tracking the 22 measures which the city has approved for action on climate change. We have a couple of volunteers who are working closely with us. Many of you will already know them, Tom Conlon and David Leland. They're working actively with us in order to move forward with developing metrics and tracking information on city progress. The good news is we're moving forward. The bad news is we're moving slowly. We need some further support from the city to be able to take the deliverables that we're turning in to the planning staff, who are our liaison, working well with David Storer and his team, to be sure. We have one of both volunteers are being trained at a special 8-session webinar on how to do advanced greenhouse gas tracking. We are, RCPA, the county agency, is also doing this training. We're the only city in Sonoma County having the training being done. So that training is being used to come up with the detailed metrics of what's possible. So with 20 seconds left before I turn it over to Fred, basically our first action item involves an improved website presentation. We've provided a draft. We've had extensive discussions. We've reached a tentative agreement that what we really want to do is to put on the website action items for the citizenry, what they can do effectively to deal with climate. So we are working our website changes in that regard. Number 2 is to identify where we are with City of Sonoma overall emissions. Here we are developing metrics and developing tracking. The record looks mixed, and I see where we are in the red light, Mayor Harrington. So let me close. Thank you for this opportunity for an update. There are more details on the brief paperwork, and turn it over to the gentleman behind me who will follow on.
Thank you, David.
Good evening. Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East, and I'll follow with David Morell's comments to move into CC2. Climate Change 2 is the citywide methods and metrics, and that's something that is really fairly simple that David Leland is working on. Is you get electric bills and different things, and you plug it into this format, and it gives the city's emissions for what the city does. The CC3 is the municipal one, and that's a little bit harder, but that's what David and Tom Conlon are working on. And so these things here, they take staff time. They take time for people to do it. And so we've got a couple of volunteers who are really doing an excellent job volunteering a lot for this. And the urgency of this is something that we see every day, and I think that it's reasonable to ask that the city does its fair share, and these changes are baked into the system. They're happening. We need to get going on getting our mitigations and at least finding out where we are. So, I think one of the things that we've recommended or that we would hope for was maybe to get some staff, like a quarter time or half time, someone to be dedicated to climate things and tracking that, so the city knows where we are, so that we're doing our fair share for that. And we have a great relationship with staff. Our CSEC staff is great, and we like I have a great relationship with all the city staff, I hope. And so I think that's what we're hoping is that the city will step up and do its fair share and do it in a timely manner. And it's been a number of years since the city council adopted the 22 local measures. So he adopted them. We're going to track them. We got to find out where we are, and we got to get going on it. And so we're just trying to keep a little heat on that, and that's about what this presentation is, in a friendly way. And then also, aside from that, I'd like to just mention that I think the UGB, or the urban growth boundary item, was supposed to be on the agenda in January. And we're almost getting into June now, and there's no sight of it. And I think that it's pretty important that process gets going. So that's going to set the stage for the rest of the general plan. And if the city council and the city doesn't have a public process on that, then private citizens are going to put through a measure that will be one that won't have a public process, and people won't be able to weigh in on it in a public way. So I think it's important that the city does at least say something about what they're going to do about that. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Fred. And is anyone else from the CSCC here? We can't respond to the merits of the matters, but perhaps we can talk about later agendizing so that we could respond to the report. Thank you for coming.
Good evening. I'm Peggy Phelan Rubens, PhelanRubens. My home address is 190 Pacheco Avenue in Novato. But I'm here tonight on behalf of the Sonoma Penglai China Sister City Committee, and I'm here to request that an issue be put onto your agenda at a future meeting. The issue is acknowledgement of donors at public spaces. We have sold inscribed bricks to raise money, and we've reached an impasse with city staff who's recommending against installation of these bricks. So we'd like the matter to be brought forth to the city council at a future meeting. Thank you. And time is of the essence because we're trying to get this thing built.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Arthur Dawson. My address is in the process of rebuilding at 5082 Warm Springs Road in Glen Ellen, and I'm representing Snow Mountain Preservation. I'm the vice chair.
Nancy Kerwin. My address is Kirwan. My address is 1920 Grove Street, Sonoma.
And we're here. We're not asking for anything from the council. We have something to give you. A couple months ago, we published a book on Sonoma Mountain as in recognition of the 25th anniversary of Sonoma Mountain Preservation, which advocates for open space, recreational opportunities, and scenic preservation on Sonoma Mountain. So, and we very much appreciate Mayor Harrington coming to the launch in Sonoma a few weeks ago, and that was actually our biggest launch out of Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Sonoma. We had over 200 people showed up, and it was really quite a stunning and amazing event. So thank you for coming and speaking. And so I have books for everybody except for our mayor because she's already got one.
Thank you so much.
And I'm just going to read one paragraph out of the book. And this, by the way, this book is a bestseller in Sonoma and Petaluma. And Copperfields and Santa Rosa doesn't keep track of those things, so we don't know for sure. This is from the first chapter called Why Sonoma Mountain. There are lots of reasons to consider Sonoma Mountain a remarkable place. It marks the center of a region, the hub of a local cosmos. More than half of Sonoma County's citizens live within a dozen miles of its summit. Ringed by roads, encircled by cities, vineyards, and villages, it lives among us as a familiar silhouette, an elevated landscape, an island in the sky that the eye and the imagination can escape to, even when the body is stuck in traffic. It is our mountain in ways that more distant and dramatic peaks never will be, both a part of our daily lives and apart from them. The roles the mountain plays go far deeper than scenery. Among other things, it serves as wildlife habitat, refuge, and corridor, as a barrier to weather and travel, as a rain catcher for 3 of Sonoma County's major streams, as inspiration and sanctuary for the human spirit. At the center of a web of relationships, it carries all the presence and complexity of a living being. So thank you, and hope you enjoy the book.
It's a beautiful book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Lynn Marie DeVincent, Guadalajara Drive, DEVINCENT. I am celebrating my 1-year anniversary discovering the world of 5G, the 5th generation of the telecom industry's wireless communication product. I would like to share one of my discoveries with you. It is called the Schumann resonance, named after a German physicist, Winfried Schumann, in 1953. It is a frequency of tones, 8 beats per second, that result when a lightning bolt strikes the Earth. Our biosphere, the roughly 55-mile-high space filled with air that wraps around our Earth, is a resonant cavity that rings like a gong every time a lightning bolt strikes. In addition to maintaining the static electric field of 130 volts per meter, in which we all stand and walk and birds fly, lightning sets the biosphere ringing at these low frequency tones. And it so happens that in a state of awake relaxation, our brains tune in to these precise frequencies. The dominant pattern of a human electroencephalogram from birth through adulthood, the well-known alpha rhythm, is bounded by the first 2 Schumann resonances. An old part of the brain, the limbic system, which involves emotions and long-term memory, process theta waves, which are bounded above by the first Schumann resonance. These same frequencies, alpha, theta, surprisingly little variation, pulsate in all animals. This information is from an astonishing book that I encourage everyone to read, The Invisible Rainbow, A History of Electricity and Life by Arthur Furstenberg, from his website. He proves, beyond a doubt, that EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, and their invisible proliferation from radio, cell towers, antennas, radar, wireless everything, satellites, is interfering with the planets and our natural rhythms, including, yes, the Schumann resonance. On May 15th, next Wednesday, there will be a National Day of Awareness to help us focus on our current 5G crisis. Here in Sonoma, I hope to create a moment of beauty with some music by a trio called the Schumann Resonators to remind us of the power of our actions and the effect they have on all creatures great and small. Francis Thompson said, "All things by immortal power, near or far, hidden to each other linked are, that thou canst not stir a flower without troubling a star." Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public that wish to make a comment?
Wow, I was just really moved by that. Hi, Ann Colachidas, 14 Hacienda Drive, Colichidas. And I'm here to talk about the Housing Our Community Town Hall. That was really great, the first session. Thank you all to the HAP and the mayor and council for making this happen. I thought Jim's presentation was really great. That kind of data and the way it was presented is something this community has needed for a long time. And I'd like to hear more of that. I'd like to hear also more about, there is some other data that we do have. We know that 40% of Sonoma County are renters and 60% of California are renters. And so I would like to hear more about how that would fit in to how our plans for housing our community. Because and who is our community that we want to house. Jim's experience in Hillsburg in preserving affordable housing, small letter affordable housing, is really great, because it'd be great if we could do something like that here in Sonoma. There are opportunities with multifamily dwellings that probably could use some rehabilitation. So that was really great. And something else that Jim said that struck me is that, there is a growing demand for various housing types. And it seems like private capital could only build luxury housing, whether it's a single family residence or other types, but it's luxury housing. There's luxury housing in San Francisco that it looks great on the outside. It's in the hippest neighborhood, but inside, I've heard, because they can't rent them, they're dividing up the apartments into little warrens and putting beds in, and many people are living in one luxury apartment as renting it out as individual sleeping units. So anyway, what you see is not what you get. And but I just want to say that so various types of housing units. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. People move a lot, and they want to be, like he said, leave their home and have it secure, whether it's an apartment, whether they rent, or whether it's a condo they buy, or even if it's people are living in RVs now. I mean, it's all out up for grabs. An example I had: a friend of mine has a lovely home on the east side. And her relatives were visiting. They stayed right over here in a vacation rental on First Street West. And she said, "Oh my God, if I would sell my house in a minute and move into that, if something like that was available." But we don't have that different kind of housing types for the churn to happen, for some of the lovely single family homes to open up for families to move into. And I would venture to guess that some people it's their largest single asset of the home that they might like to get some of their equity out of, but they can't move because they want to stay in this community. So anyway, there's so many things to think about, and I want to thank you very much, and I look forward to the continued series.
Thank you for your feedback, Anne. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will close public comment.
I have a bunch of those flyers in my car. I want to go grab them so people can hand them out. Well, can you give me a second? I'll do it after closed session.
You wanted to take a break right now?
No, I just wanted to grab it.
Oh, okay. Let me just ask, city staff, do you have any flyers for our housing town halls? Are there any here?
Yeah, I think there were some outside in the little kiosk. Do you have some with you? I can
Maybe
we can
we'll just,
replenish.
Councilmember Harvey's just going to take them, since we have you all here, and we would be delighted if you would attend our housing town halls. We'll pass them out to you so that you can know the date, the time, and the place, and we would hope to see you there.
Yes, a few. He's got one.
There's more out there.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And just as a follow-up to the questions asked during the public comment, it would be great if the city manager could comment on the schedule of the discussion about the urban growth boundary.
Yeah, so council held its quarterly agenda planning last meeting before. Apologize, don't remember the exact date. And at that point, we talked about scheduling a beginning conversation on UGB and general plan for July. So we're looking, it'll be the exact date and set, it'll be either the fourth or the fifth week, but it'll be the end of July, and we'll be putting that communication out shortly.
Thank you. And now on to meeting dedications. Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, it's with a heavy heart that I'd like to dedicate this meeting to Pastor Rich Gattenbein, who passed away on April 27th, his 68th birthday. He was the pastor at the St. Andrew Church. Pastor Rich was a driving force behind the Sonoma Valley Interfaith Ministry Association, which is a group of leaders from all faiths around the valley. That is where I first met him when I was mayor in 2015. And I always remember, he always practiced what he preached. Being a member of the church, part of going out and being the church once a year doing voluntary service was really important. He's been an impact on Sonoma, a lot of people that live in Sonoma, and his trips to Romania and Israel just in the last couple months, and he did that for many years, touched worldwide. So I definitely want to dedicate this meeting to him and his family. He is survived by his wife Lorna, daughter Julie, and her husband Russ Finley, and his grandchildren Oliver and Cecilia.
Thank you. I would just add, I saw him within the week of when he passed away, and it was such a shocking loss for the community and his family. And thank you for dedicating the meeting to him. And Councilmember Harvey.
So I have a meeting dedication for the birth of somebody. My good friend who grew up here in Sonoma, and his wife who also grew up here in Sonoma, just had a baby girl named Zoe May Moravec. And I'd like to dedicate the meeting to her and to all the things she may accomplish throughout her life. And so just very excited about that.
Thank you. And originally we were scheduled to have a presentation by Bert Whitaker of the county parks, but he was unable to give the presentation tonight, so we'll have to reschedule that. So there are no presentations. And now moving on to the consent calendar, item 4. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, the council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Are there any questions about or does anyone want to pull any items, or are there any questions about the consent calendar? I will take it out to the public for public comment on the consent calendar. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Can we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve 4.1, 4.2, 4.3.
Second. Roll call.
Councilmember Hunley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte. Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Now on to item 6, the regular calendar of the City Council. The first item is discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding a request by myself and Vice Mayor Harvey for the city to agendize for a future meeting a clarification of the city's current policies with regard to discriminatory practices. And I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Harrington, members of the council, members of the public. So the city council has a process where we have our quarterly agenda where we look comprehensively at what we're going to do the next quarter, and council discusses if there's items to add to the agenda. In addition, times some things come up sometimes in between, and we have this process where a council member can submit a request. And so again, this item here is to see if the council wants to agendize a conversation for the future. And the request really is to look at clarification of the city's policies regarding discriminatory practices. As California cities, we are bound by federal and state discrimination laws, and the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing is the kind of arbitrator and enforcer, both for employment and for housing requirements. In terms of the city, part of the way that we discriminate, that we communicate our non-discriminatory values, excuse me, we don't discriminate, let me back up. That's what happens when you're reading and thinking at the same time. So part of how we state those values and our legal requirements is through contract language. So we do within our contracts, when we do business with entities, we have a clear standard that talks about, for example, we will not, it says if you're doing business with us, you will not discriminate with your employees, and it lays out those legal requirements. So that's one area that if council has an interest in expansion, you could look at that. So with that, I'll turn it to Mayor Harrington and Vice Mayor Harvey, who asked for this item to be placed.
Great. So I'll start and then I'll turn it over to Vice Mayor Harvey. Vice Mayor Harvey and I were discussing this item, and we thought that in light of both local and national events, that it would be good for us to restate publicly and clarify that the city of Sonoma is 100% committed to making sure that there isn't discrimination and that we support all the people in our community and all of the visitors who come here. I personally think it would be good to add to our city contracts, not only with regard to the people that are hired, the non-discrimination, but also that whoever contracts with the city would not be allowed to discriminate against people who are visiting their businesses for any of the reasons listed: race, ancestry, religion, age, disability, sex, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, medical condition, genetic information, marital status, military and veteran status. So I would like to agendize a change to our policy that not only we would use that for ensuring that fair hiring was done with people we contract with, but that also all those businesses were not engaging in discrimination from people who patronize them.
Yeah, for me, I just think it's really important that we have a statement of values. When we're spending city dollars, we're spending taxpayer dollars, and so we're spending everybody's money in a lot of ways. And so I think it's really important that we look at what our policies are when we're negotiating with a business, when we're talking with a business, that we're working with somebody that shares the same values of not discriminating against somebody that they employ or somebody that would come into their office or their place of business. So I think it's really important that we look this over and ensure that our taxpayer dollars that come from everybody are going to businesses that
Welcome everyone.
welcome everyone. Yeah, treat everyone the same. So yeah.
Are there any questions or discussion? Or questions about this item? No.
No, I guess I'm questioning it because it says here, city contracts, the primary way that city communicates its non-discrimination values and legal requirements is through its written contracts for services. The city's standard contracts contain an equal employment opportunity statute that requires contractors, consultants to comply with all state and federal regulations regarding employment. Additionally, the city contracts for construction of public works projects. So what you're asking for goes beyond the equal employment opportunity?
So, for example, there's like a Supreme Court case which found that it was acceptable for a person who makes cakes, wedding cakes, to not make a wedding cake for a gay couple if the owners of that store were against gay marriage. That's all allowable. But we would be saying in the city of Sonoma, if you want to do business with us, if you have a contract with us, we're not going to enter into a contract with you unless you agree that based the categories that I read previously, you wouldn't discriminate based on any of those
And
categories.
you're talking about private business, not contracts?
I'm talking about if we contract with a private business, that they have to agree that they're not going to discriminate against people at
But
their
it's
business.
all listed here.
That applies to their employees, but not to their clientele. So the point is that they don't discriminate to clientele that would come in that are of a different sexual orientation or a different race or things like that to them, that the city would not contract with them if they discriminate to their clientele. We already have protections against employees, but not against clientele. And so it's just expanding it to also cover clientele as well.
I guess okay, fine.
Okay. Councilmember Hunley.
Which we're going to have discussion after this, which I think it's been a while since we've pulled this off the shelf, and I was, pleasantly surprised at everything that was on the list, considering I don't know when this was actually written. But I think that it says requires its consultants and contractors not to discriminate in their business practices. So I feel like it could be, but maybe we could make it even more obvious to people and clear to everybody. So I think, we'll come back for discussion, but I think it's certainly worth talking about.
Just to clarify, that is proposed language. We don't have that yet. The city council has additional contract language, could be that they not do that. So it's the proposed language.
Yeah, there you go.
Any other questions? Take it out to the public. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment on this item? You would have to come up to the podium, sir. And if you could give your name and your address, thanks.
Want me to spell my name? I have very long
Please do.
Michael Piacentini, Piacentini. I live in the Springs. So my question is, does it include money that you receive from others? So in other words, if someone is giving you money, they give money to the Red and White Ball, they give money to some other thing, does that also include that? Whereas we're saying we're not going to contract with people to buy stuff. How do we feel about the money we're going to get from people? This is sort of like the lobbying question. How much do we feel like we need to be sort of as part of that whole values in the money we receive?
Thank you. So in public comment, we're not allowed to respond to you until the end of public comment.
Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. I would like to strongly support this measure or this suggestion to put on the agenda. And I see a lot of members of the business community here, so I just had the great idea to sell my other 2 minutes to somebody else if the city would allow me. But that's all.
Hi, Gary Saperstein.
Sold. Just kidding, Gary.
Got to
Sorry.
spell my last name? No. Oh, good. Okay. And I thank you very much for bringing this topic to discussion. Even though, as you said, Mayor Harrington, that it's even national news where the Supreme Court is picking up this issue as well in the fall. My first response to that, even last week when that came down, and even tonight, is I can't believe we're still fighting this stuff in 2019. But we are. But I've lived here in Sonoma for almost 24 years now, and I want to tell you I've felt nothing more than to live in an inclusive community that is accepting and is diverse. And this city council and past city councils that I have dealt with my business Out in the Vineyard, I felt nothing but support, and I thank you so much for that. Every year, you proudly let us fly the rainbow flag during Gay Wine Weekend, and that is a symbol not only to our LGBTQ community here in Sonoma, but to our allies who live here, but also to everyone who's coming into Sonoma, that we are a welcoming and diverse community that lives here in this community. And that doesn't mean, though, that other people can think differently, because they can. Everyone has their right to think differently, but how we act upon it, I think, is important. So I thank you for bringing this up for discussion.
Thank you.
Greetings, council members. My name is Richard Silver, 95 Bernhardt Avenue in the Springs. I'd like to follow on with the gentleman who has many consonants in his name. And what I would like, knowing that you cannot respond to me, is I would like you to make an agenda item that would basically incorporate the following. Any and all monies received by the city of Sonoma from any and all means, be it a contract, be it a donation, be it a gift, be it a purchase, must comply with the full acceptance that there is non-discrimination. Age, sex, gender identity, whatever you have, but that you include that in the language in the final things that you will be discussing. I think it's imperative that Sonoma take a position of leadership for other cities and communities in the county and beyond. Can I get you a soft drink? It's a little warm in here. Okay, well, I can fan you if you wish. But you would enjoy that. But all seriousness aside, I think it's imperative that the language be very clear, following on Councilmember Agramonte and this gentleman, that you close any loophole or any way that the city could receive monies that had any taint of discrimination on them. In any currency, by the way, and that would include Bitcoin if you decide to follow the herd. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
How are you tonight? Good? Good. Step right up.
Good evening, members of the Sonoma City Council. My name is Rick Lutman. I live in Rohnert Park, and I came here tonight to speak about something else, but since this came up, I'd just like to put in my 2 cents. I'm a member of the gay community, and it's very, very comforting to know that I can come over the hill here to Sonoma, as I do frequently, and find that I am welcome here. I applaud you for this action that you're contemplating taking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Marty Bennett, 19167A Robinson Road, Sonoma. I just want to remind the council that there is some related legislation that you might want to have a look at, and that is the living wage ordinance that was passed in 2004. In that living wage ordinance, there is a so-called responsible bidder provision. And what that mandates is that in the city contracting process, it's not the lowest bidder, but is the lowest responsible bidder. And that means companies with a demonstrable excellent record of compliance with labor, health and safety, and environmental law. And that broad category of labor, I believe, also covers equal opportunity employment commission and discriminatory practices on the job. So you might want to revisit that as part of this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Anyone else on this item?
It's worth the extra effort. I'm supportive of you putting this on the agenda and having a full discussion. In the past, council members had the power to put things on the agenda. Now you need 3 votes to do it, and I suggest that you do it and have a full hearing on this important item. And I forgot to mention, tomorrow's the first farmers market, so go farmers market.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one rise to the podium, I will close public comment and bring it back for council discussion and a motion. Councilmember Henley?
This is something that I absolutely would like to look at, and I don't think that it's been considered my entire time on the council. I'm glad that it's already been out there. And Marty, thank you for bringing up the living wage, because that's another way that we can weave this into the people who deal with the city. So, and I appreciate my colleagues bringing this up. Certainly very timely.
Thank you. Did you make a motion? I just have one quick question, which is with regard to the scope of what can be discussed later. So there was a public comment about talking about receiving gifts. Can that be part of the scope of what's agendized?
It definitely can be. I mean, it's purposely written broadly tonight so that you can give us a sense of the scope of what you want us to bring back.
Great.
So that should be part of the motion.
And Councilmember Henley's.
Well, I will try to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to agendize a discussion and potential action on policies and procedures related to the city and non-discrimination. Is that
Councilmember
broad
Harvey?
enough?
I think so.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
second. So that would cover. I just make my only question. That motion would allow for us to discuss the question of monies received by the city. If that's the case, then I'll absolutely support this and second it.
City manager, is that going to work? Great. Can we have a roll call?
I'm
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just want to make a comment. I'm going back to what I've talked about because of my background in fundraising. You can take care of that with a gift acceptance policy.
Oh, okay.
So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
And could we discuss a gift acceptance policy as part of this motion?
I think if I've not seen the specific item that Councilmember Agramonte is referring to, but if a gift acceptance policy really speaks to some of those regulations, I think we have to be careful a little bit that we're not really discussing a gift acceptance policy. Then we'd have to agendize that separately. So, but I think again, if your goal is, because I'm not sure that we have a formal gift acceptance policy at all. So it may be something that we'll have to kind of look at as staff. But if you're, again, if your general desire is to be able to kind of keep the net wide, to be able to have this conversation, which is what I'm hearing from the council, and because the way it's been crafted in terms of discussion is quite wide in terms of policies and procedures for non-discrimination. And we're talking money in, money out, contracts, gifts. If that's all part of the scope, that's what I'm hearing.
I think so. Maybe just that after the agenda item, that would be a possible outcome, that we would vote to create a gift acceptance policy.
Yeah.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Henley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Before we move on to the next item, I did just want to say we have such a great city council and community, and it is welcoming and a wonderful place to live and do business. And I feel happy to be part of this and proud of our council for doing this. So thank you. Item 6.2, consideration, discussion, and possible direction on the terms and provisions of a minimum wage ordinance. And I will turn it over to the city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. At a previous council meeting, the council selected the mayor and vice mayor to form a committee to examine and make recommendations regarding the proposed minimum wage ordinance. I was tasked with assisting the committee in drafting the necessary documents and reviewing some of the laws and the regulations that other communities have adopted. And tonight in the agenda packet is a chart that outlines 4 scenarios, if you will, actually 5, that the council can take a look at for comparative purposes. The chart is 2 pages long, and the chart shows several important components of a typical minimum wage ordinance and how the state deals with large employers when it comes to minimum wage, how it deals with small employers. Also, the North Bay Jobs for Justice proposal is outlined in both terms of the larger employers and the smaller employees. And then on the far right column is a list of the proposals being made by the council committee of the mayor and vice mayor. I would like to make a correction on the chart. The second to last column from the right-hand side, under the category of wages, it sets forth the North Bay Jobs for Justice small employers proposal, and it shows that in 2021, specifically October 1, 2021, the minimum wage will be governed by the applicable CPI. That's not correct. That date should show that there is a $15 per hour minimum wage that would be triggered as of that date. And then in 2022, October 1, under the small employer North Bay Jobs for Justice proposal, the CPI would kick in at that point. I would like to make one last comment and then turn it over to the mayor and vice mayor to go through some of these points that there's been some questions raised as to whether or not the amount of minimum wage that the council might approve above the state minimum wage is subject to a tip credit. A tip credit is a credit that would be subtracted from the amount the employer would have to pay under minimum wage based on the amount of tips that an employee receives. So the tip is credited against the employer's minimum wage obligation. That's what a tip credit is. Tip credits are not lawful in the state of California. Certainly they're not lawful as to the minimum wage set by California state law. But there's been raised the question whether or not tip credits would be lawful to be subtracted from the amount an employer might have to pay above the state minimum wage pursuant to a local municipality's minimum wage obligation. My opinion remains the same, that tip credits are not lawful even as to that delta, that difference. Wages are defined very broadly in the state labor code as any amount owed to an employee, and the section of the labor code, a different one that deals with whether tip credits are permitted, says that they are not permitted as to the wages owed. So I've construed that to mean including the wages owed pursuant to a local municipality's minimum wage ordinance. I'm certainly open to other research that might show a different result, but for the time being, the council, in my opinion, should proceed on the basis that tip credits are not permitted at all. So having said that, I will turn the further discussion of this item over to the mayor and vice mayor. Thank you.
Great. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the procedure we'll use tonight and briefly how we got here. About maybe more than a year ago, this council voted to consider an agenda item about increasing the minimum wage. And then we voted to hold a study session on a study conducted by UC Berkeley on the effects of a minimum wage. That study session was held. After that time, the council decided to create a subcommittee to work on this issue. That subcommittee was comprised of myself and Vice Mayor Harvey. During our work as the subcommittee, we met with North Bay Jobs with Justice. We talked to employees, and we also met with a number of employers. We worked with the Chamber of Commerce, who set up meetings with all interested persons to come and talk to us about the employer's perspective. The Chamber of Commerce commissioned a survey, which they sent out to all of their members, and we received the responses from those surveys. We held a public meeting with the employers, which was very well attended, and received their feedback. Councilmember Harvey and I are going to present to you. Councilmember Harvey will go through it with you, what the various proposals in front of you are, what they mean, and a little bit about our thinking on them. At the end of that, there will be time for council questions, any questions about the proposals or about the law. Then we will take it out to the public for public comment. You'll have up to 3 minutes to comment on this item. Once people are done making public comments, I will close public comment and we'll bring it back to the city council for discussion. And then a motion can be made at that time to move forward. So that's the process we're going to use tonight. In terms of a vote, the way the vote will work is that it would be a straw vote on 3 items. The first item being which, if any, proposal would we adopt? That's item number 1. The second one would be, should there be what's called a labor carve-out? Should labor unions be exempt from this law if they have a contract with an employer? And the third will be what consumer price index would we be tied to? And so those are the 3 decision points, and we'll have 3 separate votes. And I will turn it over to Vice Mayor Harvey to walk us through each of the proposals. And this is the chart that Jeff just referenced. And we don't have a slide for it.
Can we put it up on the screen? Is that possible?
No. Okay, we don't have that, but if you have the packet, I have a paper packet. So it's page 38 and 39 of the paper packet, and I believe there are paper packets. Are there any paper packets left outside?
The packet's also available online, so if you go to sonomacity.org, you can find the city council agenda and find it there. I apologize, we probably should have had this able to
Madam
go on
Mayor,
the screen.
if
Yes.
you would like, if you have a paper copy of it, I can get it on the document. I can get the document camera out.
Yeah, we'll get the
Okay, let's do that.
Let's do that, definitely.
We'll do that.
Why don't we just wait? How long do you need? Okay, why don't we just give it a few minutes so we can put it up while we're talking about it? I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, so you want me to start?
No,
Okay,
opposite.
opposite. You want me to stop
Yeah.
and then start?
Yeah, 1 sec.
How's everybody's day going?
Mayor Harrington, do you just want to take a quick, brief 5-minute recess?
We can, yeah.
Let's do that.
We'll take a 5-minute break to get the document camera, and then we'll come back. Thanks. Can I ask somebody to shut the door to the anterior room, please? Thanks. Great. So, all right. So unfortunately, we are not able to project the chart. And can I ask folks to take a seat? Thanks. We are not able to project it, but if you are here, there are packets outside. We're talking about page 38 and 39 of the paper packet, and then also it is available online. The city's agenda is available online, and you can look at it on your smartphone or at your computer at home, and I can't take any questions from the audience.
There's there's only one paper packet out front. That's the overall binder.
Oh, so we don't have copies of the paper
there's
packet.
not.
I apologize.
There's only one master out there. Thank you.
So for those of you who want to follow along, it's available online on the city's website, and you can go to today's meeting and pull the agenda and look at it there. And I apologize that we don't have paper copies. And with that, I will turn it over to Councilmember Harvey to walk us through.
Okay. So basically there are 5 options, 6 options that we have here. The state law currently is moving forward with raising the minimum wage. For large employees, large employers, this is going to be, currently is at $12 an hour, moving to $15 an hour, $1 an hour increase until, and ending at 15 in 2022, where it will chain to US CPI. For small employers, it's at $11 right now, moving up $1 an hour to $15 an hour in 2023, where it will chain to CPI. The state minimum wage law does not allow for collective bargaining contracts or labor exemptions. It also does not allow for tip credits. And so that's just the state law that we have right now. In conversation with Amy and in conversation with labor and in conversation with members of the business community, we discussed obviously the state law, but it was our feeling that because the cost of living in Sonoma is extremely expensive, much higher than other areas in the state. I did a rental search between the difference of Bakersfield and Sonoma. $1,300 a month is normal in Bakersfield, $2,000 a month is normal in Sonoma. We felt that there should be a higher minimum wage here. So this was also what came forward to us from Jobs for Justice proposal after the study session that we had here in front of the city. So the North Bay Jobs with Justice, they've amended to include a small employers as well. Their large employers would go on October 10th of this year, we go to $12.75, so $1.75 more than the state. And then on October 1st of next year, would go to $15 an hour, and then on October, and then would chain to CPI. Their small businesses, so less than 26 employers, would go to $11.66 on October 1st of this year, $13.32 on October 1st of next year, and then $15 on the October 1st of 2021. The Jobs with Justice does include a labor carve-out, so it would allow a unionized or a labor union to negotiate for lower wages than the proposed minimum wage or the city minimum wage, coming back down to the state. Is the lowest that they could go as part of a collective bargaining agreement. So an agreement between the workers and the union and the employer. They do not allow for tip credit, and they chain to the Oakland, San Francisco CPI rather than what the state does, which is the U.S. or national CPI. What we have proposed as the City Council is kind of considering the business community's opinion. This is just another alternative. The business community's opinion was that this jump was onerous and very fast for them, and was going to cause some disruption. And so taking that under advisement, we decided to put another option on the table. We would rise to $13.50 on January 1st of next year, $14.50 on January 1st the following year, $15.50 on January 1st of 2022, and then $16.50 on January 1st of 2023, which we would chain to CPI. We've decided to leave it up to council discussion as far as which one will follow. And then with our proposal, we've also decided to leave it up to council discussion to choose which CPI we chain to. Currently in the list, it says chain to US CPI. I'm happy to discuss that. We have heard from our city attorney that a tip credit is not legal, and we can discuss that as well. And then we are leaving it up to council discussion as far as collective bargaining agreements, though we've had some discussions that it's not necessarily something that the group supports. I think that's about it. Is there other stuff?
I think these are the beginning ones, and there are some other more nuanced details that we can get into if we reach consensus on increasing the minimum wage. And I would probably ask at that time for our city attorney to take us through the enforcement possibilities and the penalties at that time if we get there.
Yeah, there's another difference where believe that the Jobs with Justice proposal would have the city involved with the enforcement of the minimum wage, local minimum wage, whereas ours is completely up to the employee.
And so I'll just add for the report out of the subcommittee, in addition to considering the feedback we heard from employers, we had a basic premise, and the premise was that the minimum wage in the city of Sonoma should be higher than the minimum wage in less expensive cities on an ongoing basis. And so under ours, when the state is at $15, we will be $1.50 higher. So employees in Sonoma would make at that time $3,000 more a year than someone living in Redding, California. And we thought that this proposal was good because forever, if we had the same CPI as the state, we would always be above the state minimum in recognition of the fact that this is a very expensive place to live. The Jobs with Justice proposal, the 15 by 2020 was started many years ago, and I'm sure they can tell you how many years ago that was. And a lot of the cities that are at 15 by now went up by $1 a year until they got to 2020. And so because of our shortened time frame, we wanted to create another option. Both Councilmember Harvey and I are comfortable with actually either option. Yep. So we would support either, but the proposal we have is a little bit slower, but it winds up with workers, low-wage workers, making an additional amount over the state minimum wage kind of in perpetuity, which we think is really important. And another context, which we talked to the business community about, is that as we figure out what to do about the affordable housing crisis, one of the key things we can do is make sure that people have more money in their pockets to pay the ever-escalating rents. And so for a couple, let's say, who are making $11 an hour, to have an extra $5 an hour, $2.50 each, will be significant. That's $10,000 a year, and maybe it won't solve the problem, but certainly it'll be important towards giving people dignity and working on ensuring that people can stay in this community. So that's sort of some of the background on it.
Yeah, so the key differences, the key decisions here are, one, do we want to raise minimum wage at all? Amy and I definitely support raising the minimum wage in the city of Sonoma. And then which minimum wage do we want to raise to? North Bay Jobs with Justice would raise for, again, employers with more than 25 employees would be at $15 by 10/1/20, so October 1st of 2020. For small employers would reach $15 by October 1st of 2021. And then our proposal would reach $16.50 by 2023. And we've done some calculations out with the CPI, and so we're close to Jobs with Justice when it hits 2023 as well.
I think with that, we could take council questions unless you...
Sure. No, I'm good with that.
Great.
Just Mayor Harrington, just to let you know, the technology, the same sheet is now projecting for members of the public as well.
Ta-da! Great. So you can see, if you're looking at the chart now, the left is the current state law So that's what for large employers and small employers. And then there's the Jobs with Justice proposal after that, large employers and small employers. And then there's the subcommittee alternate option, which is the final column there.
And just to be clear, ours does not differentiate between large and small employers.
Okay, great. And with that, council questions. Okay. I will take it out to the public for public comment. Please say your name, your address, and keep your comments to about 3 minutes. Thank you. So, and also, if people have questions during public comment, we will keep a list of those questions and respond to them after everyone has given their comments.
Thanks. Good evening, Council. I'm Mara Ventura. I'm the Executive Director of North Bay Jobs with Justice. I want to thank you all, but particularly thanks to the subcommittee, Mayor and Vice Mayor, for all of the work that you guys have done and just your leadership on getting us to where we are today. We're really excited about the work we've been able to do together to figure out what ordinance we think works best for the city of Sonoma. And although we have a few differences between our proposal, we really see this as a huge victory for the city of Sonoma. And thank you for all you've done. And we'll continue to be available to provide information and data to the city as needed. I want to share a little bit about our proposal, and then we'll have speakers tonight speaking to various pieces of our proposal and why we're really excited around 15. First, of the 2,000 Sonoma employees covered by our proposed legislation, 1,000 of them work for large companies with more than 100 employees, such as CVS, Whole Foods, Staples, Lucky's, Rite Aid, Pete's, Starbucks, Jack in the Box, McCauley's, Friedman's, and several large nursing homes and assisted living facilities. According to the National Employment Law Project, these firms are enjoying robust profits and have fully recovered from the Great Recession. Some of these firms, like Whole Foods, have already bumped their entry-level wages to $15 an hour, and others, like Friedman's, pay entry-level wages just below $15, and we think that they would be able to comply to $15 by 2020. Second, the affordable housing crisis is now catastrophic, and we're experiencing the displacement of low-income families from the city, if not the Sonoma Valley, as longtime residents must move to affordable housing markets in Mendocino or Solano counties or Vallejo. Wages for the bottom 60% of the county workforce have remained flat since the 70s, and wages for the bottom 20% dropped by 10%. Moreover, between 2000 and 2016, median rents jumped by 25%, while median renter annual incomes only increased by 9%. Prior to the Tubbs fire, and immediately afterwards, rents skyrocketed 35%. Low-income families now spend more than half of their income on rent, with little left for other essentials such as healthcare, utilities, and food. Procuring funding and building new affordable housing takes years, and renters in the city and the county need help right now. The rent simply can't wait, and raising the minimum wage to $15 by 2020 is the fastest way to make housing more affordable. And thirdly, I just want to end by saying the UC Berkeley Labor Center reports the economic impacts of $15 minimum wage in the North Bay with 2-year phase-in to $15 is manageable for small firms. At this moment, we're 4 months shy of 2 years' notice. For example, their data indicates that operating costs in the restaurant industry would increase by just 2.1% and cumulative prices by only 1.8% with no negative impacts on restaurant employment. And I just want to quickly end by saying the State of Working Sonoma report that we put out about our county also said that of the people who are most economically unstable are immigrants, they're folks of color, and they're women, moreover. So we also see this as a racial justice and a gender justice issue. Thanks.
Marty Bennett, co-chair, North Bay Jobs with Justice, and I want to continue on about the reasons why we think our phase-in schedule 15 by 2020 is what the council should adopt. Numerous California cities, 18 in the Bay Area, have adopted 15 by 2020 or earlier. Amongst these are San Francisco, which is already at 15 by 2018. 8 cities in Santa Clara County reached 15 January 1st, 2019. 4 cities in San Mateo will be at 15 by 2020. And the city and county of Los Angeles and Santa Monica, Pasadena, Long Beach will be at 15 by 2020. Most recently, Alameda and Fremont voted in 2018 and 2019, respectively, for 15 by 2020. There is no evidence of adverse effects such as business closures or job loss amongst low-wage workers with a 2-year, $3 an hour phase-in. And it is not correct
that cities who are at 15 by 2020 phased in $1 a year. Some have had step raises that are as much as $2 that we are proposing in the second year. 15 by 2020 is essential because we propose such a phase into 6 cities in Sonoma and Marin counties. The city of Petaluma will likely pass the first minimum wage law in the county before July 1st, and at their study session on April 8th, the council unanimously directed staff to work with our coalition to craft a final ordinance that will mandate 15 by 2020 with an extra year phase-in for small business. Petaluma will be the model for the entire county, and if Sonoma adopts a more gradual phase-in, it will not align with Petaluma and the other cities where we have introduced minimum wage legislation. Finally, we are proposing the city minimum wage is raised annually based upon the Bureau of Labor Statistics Bay Area CPI. San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose, which was 3.3% between February 2018 and February 2019. The council subcommittee is now recommending the Bureau of Labor Statistics California State CPI, which was from February 2018 to February 2019, 2.7%. It is a fundamental principle of the state and local living wage and minimum wage campaigns that at both the federal and state levels, the purchasing power of the minimum wage has been eroded over time because there has not been an annual cost of living adjustment, and the legislature has made adjustments irregularly. For the first time in the state's history, the California minimum wage law passed in 2016 includes an
Marty,
annual
I'm sorry,
and automatic
you're gonna have to wrap
CPI.
it up. Your time is up. You have to
Oh, I
end.
can't finish.
Well, there's a whole bunch of people waiting behind you, so tonight I'm not going to actually be able to let people have
Okay,
extra time.
thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening again, Mayor Harrington and members of the council. I'm still Rick Lutman from Rohnert Park, and if you want to write me a letter, I'm at 917 Doreen Avenue, D-O-R-I-N-E. I'm on the executive board of North Bay Jobs with Justice, and I'm the treasurer of the organization. The draft ordinance that we've proposed for you is based upon minimum wage legislation that's been approved and implemented by other Bay Area cities such as Cupertino, Redwood City, Oakland, and Emeryville. We were quite surprised and disappointed that the staff report indicates the council subcommittee does not agree with provisions in our draft that would enable the city to investigate complaints if a worker believes their employer is not complying with the minimum wage law, and would enable the city to issue fines, administrative orders, and initiate civil action against any employer who the city finds is not in compliance. We have a letter here from our attorney, Paul Moore, which we would like to read into the record. He's a senior partner with the firm of McCracken, Sterneman and Holsbury, one of the largest and oldest labor law firms in the state. These attorneys have drafted many of the minimum wage laws adopted by cities throughout the state. To the honorable members of the Sonoma City Council, we represent North Bay Jobs with Justice and write concerning the proposed minimum wage legislation before you. We commend the council in considering an ordinance that will help workers in the city of Sonoma meet the increasing cost of living in the North Bay. We are concerned, however, by the proposal that the ordinance's mechanisms for public enforcement be jettisoned. Enforcement by the city is a necessary complement to creating a private right of action under which workers who have the means may sue in court. Without effective public enforcement mechanisms, the ordinance may be an empty gesture for many low-wage Sonoma workers. All of the local minimum wage laws in California with which we are familiar include some form of public enforcement. There are several reasons why a public enforcement mechanism is crucial. Low-wage workers frequently lack the means to hire a lawyer and sue in court. While the ordinance as proposed holds out the promise of attorney's fees to a successful plaintiff who endorses his or her rights, low-wage workers are not able to hire lawyers out of pocket, and the promise of possible contingency fees particularly on recoveries that average less than $2,000, is often insufficient to attract counsel. I'm going to turn over the mic to my colleague behind me, who will read the rest of this letter.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Maria. I am the lead organizer of North Bay Jobs with Justice, and I will continue reading our attorney's letter. So while the State Labor Commissioner has had the jurisdiction to enforce local minimum wage laws since January 1st, 2016 under AB 970, enforcement resources at the state level are limited. So also, an increasing number of low-wage workers are required to enter into mandatory arbitration agreements as a job condition. The reason for the use of mandatory arbitration is access to the courts is now barred for more than 60 million American workers. So that's according to the Economic Policy Institute. So in fact, California has the highest rate of mandatory arbitration coverage in the nation. Mandatory arbitration agreements require workers to waive their right to go to court to enforce employment law violations. They frequently prohibit workers from pursuing remedies as class actions, making it impossible for them to act collectively to enforce their rights. Procedural rules designed to favor employers mean that workers win less often and receive lower damages when they do. Government agencies enforcing minimum wage laws on the public's behalf, however, are not bound by the mandatory arbitration agreements that low-wage workers are required to sign. These factors have led most California cities that have adopted minimum wage laws of all sizes to include mechanisms for public enforcement, including administrative enforcement power, statutory fines and penalties, and the ability to revoke the business licenses of violators. Some examples of large cities with public enforcement mechanisms include Oakland, San Francisco, San Jose, Los Angeles, and representative smaller cities include Emeryville, Los Santos, City of Cupertino, and Redwood City. We hope that the council will agree that effective public enforcement tools are a necessary component of the City of Sonoma's minimum wage ordinance. Without them, the ordinance will be an empty promise for Sonoma workers who are relying on it. Respectfully, Paul L. Moore.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mario Castillo. I'm a longtime resident of Sonoma. I lived here for about 30 years. I am a parent of an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. I am a community activist. I have worked here most of my life. So I know firsthand the effects of not having enough to pay rent and pay for food. I currently work for Canal Alliance in Marin. I make about $4 more than what I was making while I work here in Sonoma. So I don't mind the commute, actually. I am sure all of you are familiar with the recent story of some new developers, Stacy Matson and her husband Ken, who have bought a few businesses worth about $80 million, on how they have been mounting backlash after a series of anti-gay online posts made by his wife on social media. In fact, I believe some of you have publicly condoned such actions. I personally applaud and celebrate living in a place that seems to recognize and celebrate the cultural diversity. Having said that, I would like to suggest an additional way in which you would recognize the diversity and inclusion in that is by recognizing the social inequity that exists with those who do the hard labor and make Sonoma a special place. Parents who are missing out on the opportunity to spend time with their children every day since they have to do double shifts in order to pay rent and food. The young people that we continue to lose once they graduate from our local high school in an absence of a job that gives them enough to be able to save and continue their higher education and pay for rent and pay for food. In fact, that's my kid. He will be graduating hopefully this year, and he attended a local job fair, and he actually decided to apply for a company that is willing to pay him $15 an hour. So entire families who continue to leave the area, tired of not being able to afford the high rents and not having enough to eat. This is the reality that I know, and yes, I could be wrong, but according to the statistics and experts on the subject, what I share, it's true. It is in my humble opinion that the slogan "Everyone is welcome here" has to be supported in public policy that guarantee the opportunity for every person to earn enough and live with dignity in this community. It is time for the city of Sonoma to show what they preach, a commitment to the people who do the hard work in this community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, we don't do clapping. If you want to support somebody, you can do some jazz hands. We don't do booing either, in case somebody had that in mind.
Mayor Harrington and Council, my name is Ben Boyce. I'm a longtime resident of the Valley, right with the Sonoma Sun. And I got a call from Marty, which is how a lot of people end up showing at these things, and asked me to show up here tonight. I have not been involved in any great detail in the current Jobs with Justice campaign, but I had worked for Marty previously as the coordinator for the predecessor organization, the Living Wage Coalition, which I think David would be the only one present who remembers passing that ordinance back in 2006. And that followed a full spectrum 18-month campaign, which Marty captained at that time. And so I'm sort of having the time lapse effect, because new council, new scenario, and what I'm glad to see is that this isn't coming about as a result of a massive citizen campaign and multiple public meetings and guest speakers. This is coming from the council itself. So to me, that's signs of political evolution in a time lapse sort of fashion. And I realize that your job is to get into the weeds of these things. I don't have to do that, because for me, that my part of it is to support the basic principle, which is that if a person works full time, they should not live in poverty. That should be a basic American principle that conservatives and liberals alike should agree on. We all value hard work, and it needs to pay enough to live on. So that principle is in effect. There are specific sectors like the food workers who are traditionally underpaid. So this is going to be a problem. Any change involves adjustments at the margins. And I hope that we can approach those adjustments in that spirit. And I would conclude by saying that it's maybe hard sometimes for professional class people to understand what the difference between, say, $12 and $15 an hour makes. Because they think, well, if I'm budgeting, someone costs 25 or 28, that's not going to change their class status. But the difference in the lives of a poor person working at or near minimum wage, those $3, that 12 to 15, can mean the difference between disgrace in their personal lives or dignity from being able to be self-sufficient. So I would urge people to look at the big picture and realize that we have to move in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Mayor and council members. My name is Dennis Posekay, P-O-C-E-K-A-Y. I'm a citizen of Petaluma. My address is 67 Windsor Lane. I've been working with Jobs with Justice in Petaluma, and I'll come back to that. It's already been mentioned over and over that we have this affordable housing crisis at this point, and that we need to help families as quickly and in any way we can. I think the $15 minimum wage is the quickest and easiest way we can make a dent in this issue. For example, even though this is not going to fix people's lives to the extent we would like, for example, I have a Haitian refugee friend in Petaluma who pays over 75% of his income in rent at this time. By the time $15 goes in, he'll be paying a little less than 65% of his income. Most of you and folks in the audience wouldn't consider that great, but it is great relative to over 75%. Restaurant owners say they'll lose business if you are the only city to undertake this. And I was a little bit concerned by the Press Democrat article this morning that failed to mention that other cities were considering doing this. I'm sure you know that. But I want everyone to know that this proposal is being made in all the major cities of Sonoma County. In Petaluma, as has already been mentioned, the phase-in to $15 by 2020 was not considered controversial, and the union opt-out was not controversial, and a straw vote on April 8th was unanimous to move forward with minor tweaks. I think one thing in terms of taking into account what businesses like and don't like about such a proposal, it's important to realize that I think businesses that have outlets in more than one town in Sonoma County would not like to have different ordinances in every town in the city. And so I would urge you strongly to confer with some of the other cities that are considering this at the present time about whether you can make your ordinances similar. Again, that applies to enforcement as well. It is the practical experience in these other cities that have passed these ordinances that this practice has demonstrated that by having similar rules for both enforcement and for the minimum wage, things work better throughout the county or region where this is the case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Clayton Taylor. I am the cannabis organizer for Teamsters Local 665. I'm here to share with you guys an example of someone putting in the living wage ordinance here in Sonoma County. This past Saturday, we had just under 100 cannabis employees and 12 different owner-operators sign on to a cannabis master agreement, basically stating that the living wage for cannabis workers was going to be $25 an hour. In the course of 60 days, that will be implemented. And that was agreed upon by all 12 owner-operators, as well as the 91 employees that were in attendance at that meeting. When we talk about cannabis employees, too, especially, that is an industry where they're being crippled by taxation, and they have no federal write-offs, but they're still able to make $25 an hour work for their employees. So I question when it's brought up that we can't do that in other industries. This is an industry that's brand new and is being crippled by taxation, but they're still figuring out a way to make that work. And kind of along the lines of other cities putting this in place, I believe that the study session for Santa Rosa is tomorrow on the $15 minimum wage. But I just wanted you guys to be aware. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mark Maloof. I'm a union organizer with Teamsters Local 665. Proponents of the citywide living minimum wage are opposed to a so-called credit for the living wage minimum, and as the gentleman here mentioned earlier, that's not even allowed in the state of California, so that's good for all of us to know. However, our proposal would establish a citywide minimum wage that would be phased in to $15 an hour by 2020. And it's important to look at the status of tipped workers in this. So while 81% of tipped workers are employed in the restaurant industry, they're not all restaurant workers. Tipped workers include bartenders, car wash and nail salon workers, valet and airport attendants, massage therapists, and hairstylists. The owners of a few high-end restaurants on the plaza really shouldn't be setting the terms for a minimum wage ordinance that includes all the city's workers. And yet, despite the assertions from some restaurant owners about good tips made by their employees, the fact is that most restaurant workers here are part of the working poor and don't earn anything close to a middle-class income, regardless of whether they're front of the house or back of the house employees. Let's look at the statistics. According to data from the California Employment Development Department, in Sonoma County, bartenders' average hourly wage was $15.75, including tips, and the average annual income was just above $32,000. Servers' average hourly wage was $15.84, including tips, and their average annual income was also just above $32,000. And the same for restaurant cooks, with an average hourly wage of $15.76, and the average income was just above $32,000. And the average hourly wage for dishwashers was $12.39, with the average annual income of less than $25,000. Now, according to the California Budget and Policy Project, a 2017 living or self-sufficiency wage for two parents in Sonoma County, each working working full-time to support 2 children is roughly $23 an hour, or an annual family income of more than $81,000 to afford basic necessities, and that's without having to rely on state or federal public assistance programs. It's important to recognize that 2/3 of the working poor families in Sonoma County conform to the 2 working parents, 2-child family type. $23, to be honest, is a conservative estimate that doesn't include the extras many consider necessities, such as dental coverage, savings for retirement, and education. Now, I'll finish off with this. Frankly, the argument that successful restaurants like Mary's Pizza and Girl and the Fig can't afford to pay their workers, their profit creators, the bare subsistence in order to survive in the city is frankly disingenuous and in bad faith. Sonoma workers know better, and I hope that this council does too. Labor urges this council to stand with working families, not just the bosses on the Chamber of Commerce. 15 by 2020, no tip credit, and nothing less. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carol Taylor. I'm an IHSS provider and a member of SEIU 2015. I live at 191 West Verano in Sonoma. I'm wearing these because of a medical issue. So we're asking the City Council to say no to this tip credit for the minimum wage law. And even though that's been ruled out, I'd like to proceed with some of these statistics because there is an overlap. The annual incomes of tipped workers, particularly in the restaurant industry, is less than half of a self-sufficiency wage. But many studies have shown that the restaurant business can readily boost wages of their workers to $15 an hour over 2 years without loss or hardship. I'd like to briefly refer to a few of these studies. A UC Berkeley Labor Center report about the economics of the $15 minimum wage in the North Bay concluded that when phased into $15, the restaurant industry's operating costs would increase by just 2.1%. The cumulative prices would increase only by 1.8%, with no negative impacts on restaurant employment. States other than California are also considering abolishing the tip credit. In another study published in 2018, UC Berkeley economists examined the food services industry across the country, including restaurants in Chicago, Washington, D.C., Oakland, San Francisco, and San Jose, after each city implemented citywide minimum wage laws. By December 2016, the end of the study period, the economists found that low-wage restaurant worker earnings increased without significant job loss in the restaurant industry. There's an aspect to the tipped employees. You have to be nice to people who could be obnoxious, because that's how you're going to feed your kids. So interestingly, the power and money relationship shows up here. A tip credit would make sexual harassment more likely. Restaurant workers in states with a $2.13 subminimum wage are twice as likely to experience sexual harassment as those in the states which bar tip credit. This is important because a study by the Federal Equal Opportunity Employment Commission found that 90% of tipped female workers report some form of sexual harassment from management or customers. Some restaurant and other business owners hire teenagers for seasonal employment, and you'll see that we have a special category for the learners, those between 14 and 18. However, most people who are working for tips now are in their 30s, have families, and are totally different from the teenage learners. I want to thank you very much.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, okay.
Jinx.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Harrington, council members, and city staff. My name is Jack Buckhorn. I'm the executive director of the North Bay Labor Council, and I rise to support the $15 minimum wage going up by 2020, the Bay Area CPI, and also the opt-out for unions. And I want to explain that last one a little bit more because it seems counterintuitive. So let me go into a little bit. So there is a provision in our proposed minimum wage ordinance that enables unionized low-wage workers and their unions to opt out of the minimum wage law through a democratic decision-making process and then bargain with their employers for total compensation well above the $15 minimum we're talking about. Such a provision is included in nearly all 23 other minimum wage laws in California. So why is this important and how does it work? And that's really the question, isn't it? So after internal deliberations and a vote by the members about opting out or the waiver provision, it enables a union that represents low-wage workers such as Unite Here to encourage your employer to recognize the union. So it's hard to organize workers, and they put you through hell, right? Even if you have all the cards signed. So this is a tool that the union can use to say, listen, we'll give you a little bit lower than the minimum to start out if you'll recognize our workforce and if you'll, in good faith, collectively bargain an agreement, that first agreement. So sometimes you win an election and you have a very difficult time getting that first agreement. It's just a tool that they can use to allow the union and those workers, because the union is the workers. They discuss it, they vote on it, they come in and they offer this to the employer, and it's worked. So it's worked. Unite Here has had success doing that. Let me give you an example. At the recently organized Santa Rosa Vineyard Creek Hotel, the union bargained to reduce the number of rooms that housekeepers must clean each shift from, get this, 28 rooms to 15. 28 rooms to 15. These are the tools that help them do that. So it's really important. I would just really encourage you to do that. Your own living wage ordinance here has the Bay Area CPI. We live in the Bay Area. Bay Area CPI makes sense. And you also have the opt-out clause in there. So please do that. Please implement it as soon as possible. Workers need help now, especially these working poor. Rents are not going to go down below $2,000. They're going to go up. This is the quickest way to put money in these low-wage, working poor families and give them the dignity that they deserve. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Luis Bravo. I live in Calistoga and I work here in Sonoma. I'm a school counselor. I'm going to go ahead and finish what Mr. Bennett started. I'm here advocating for the Bureau of Labor Statistics Bay Area CPI, which was 3.3 from February 2018 to February 2019. The staff report indicates that the committee is now recommending the Bureau of Labor Statistics California State CPI from February 2018 to February 2019, which was 2.7%. We urge the council to adopt our proposed Bay Area CPI measure of that we used in the living wage ordinance approved in 2004, and also applies to unusual cost of livings for the city employees as well. Why would we want to do this? It is a fundamental principle of the state and local living wage and minimum wage campaigns that both the federal and state levels, the purchasing power of the minimum wage has eroded over time because there is not an annual cost of living adjustment, and the legislature has made adjustments irregularly. For the first time in the state's history, the California minimum wage law passed in 2016 includes an annual automatic CPI based on aggregate statewide BLS data on the cost of living across the state. However, the cost of living is much higher in coastal areas versus inland. And hence we need a regional CPI based upon the actual cost of living in the North Bay. To adopt a CPI that's lower than the actual cost of living here, it does not go in accordance to living wage and minimum wage laws. We are not aware of any Bay Area jurisdiction that has adopted the state CPI. Moreover, we believe the Petaluma City Council will adopt the Bay Area CPI, which is also in the living wage law. If Sonoma adopts a lower CPI in the city, it's also out of alignment with Petaluma and likely other cities that implement a 15 citywide minimum wage law. As a school counselor, living in Sonoma is different than living in Modesto, in Fresno, and in Stockton. Living in Calistoga and living in Sonoma and Healdsburg is different, right? So I support that because of that. As a school counselor, I have some students that say, I need to work to help my mom out. I want to work as a junior, as a senior. It is clear that people cannot live and afford to live in Sonoma, and it is crucial for us to support these students and these families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington, members of the council and staff. I'm Mark Bodenhammer with the Sonoma Valley Chamber of Commerce. Good to see you all tonight. Nice to meet you. I want to start off just, there was a comment made earlier about our restaurant owners and sort of casting them off as people who don't care about employees. And the number one thing I've taken out of this, I've been really amazed getting to know these people and getting to know the lengths to which they go to take care of their employees. These are people who have co-signed on leases for a house for an employee, people who have given money out of their pockets for car repairs, people who provide scholarships, people who have staff members that they consider members of their family. And I can tell you that working for the Chamber of Commerce here, it really is rewarding working for a group of people that do things in the right way. We've had a lot of conversations about a minimum wage, and none of them have mentioned keeping profits for themselves. The only rationale I've heard for people not having a minimum wage is to make sure they can assign it in certain ways, to make sure they can be active members in the community. So I'm not here to advocate one way or another. I really just wanted to come and thank Mayor Harrington and Vice Mayor Harvey for your work with us. You guys really did go above and beyond. I know that there were public meetings and set meetings that you guys were assigned to go to, and then I also heard of a number of one-on-one meetings that you guys went out and met specifically with other business community members just to learn about their operations, and I think that says a lot about your leadership and how seriously you guys take this. So in closing, I just want to say that we're here to assist. I don't know what you guys want to do for a enforcement framework. I think everybody agrees on increasing minimum wage. Obviously, the numbers are the devil's in the details there. But whatever we can do to help, if there are things you can do to make it easier, implementation that can make it easier on businesses, we'd be happy to put together a supplemental poster that could be handed out to employers that they could post with the California labor law posters. Whatever it takes to help out, we're here to do. I did just quickly Google this. The city of Richmond has a medical benefit credit that doesn't go to the maximum of minimum wage or goes above and beyond. El Cerrito has something about a cash wage. Berkeley and San Jose both have exemptions for people who work with youth and training programs. San Mateo has special rates for their minimum wage for nonprofit and for-profit. Santa Monica has a separate wage entirely for hotel employees. So there's a number of communities that are finding ways to create exemptions. So I don't know. I'm certainly not a lawyer and don't claim to be. But anyway, just want to thank you, and hopefully we get a good decision that is balanced and everybody can be well here.
Thank you, Mark.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mary McDevitt. I'm retired. I live here in Sonoma at 475 Montini Way, and I'm here to support 15 by 20, and I'm presenting myself as a purchaser. And looking at the figures from Jobs for Justice, I certainly would have no problems with an increased price in restaurants of an average of 2.1%. So, and I think if that goes to any other business, they don't need any time to work this into their price range. If they have good accountants, they can tell them in 8 hours what to charge so that they can make up for this. As far as monitoring this, I would like to suggest that you consider a wall of shame with a phone number, and if 3 or more employees call in and say they're not getting the $15 an hour, the name of the industry goes up on the wall of shame, and it does not come down until that company can prove that they're paying $15 an hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was interesting. Hi, Richard Silver, 95 Bernhard. A couple of things. Let me begin by saying that anything less than $15 per hour per worker in any establishment in the city of Sonoma on Jan 1, 2020 is absolutely unacceptable. And here's a couple of things to consider. let's not discriminate between someone who works at Parsons Hardware or someone who works at one of the beneficent owned restaurants. Until 2018, in the state of California, as your city attorney will attest, tip pooling was illegal. What does that mean? If you do not face the customer as a server, sommelier, or busser, you cannot have tips pooled. That was legal until 2018 rather. Restaurants do not tell you on their menus or in any literature, we take all the tips and we distribute them equitably among all persons. No one does. Perhaps they should. And therefore, it's imperative that you pay everyone a minimum wage, regardless of who they work for or what they do. If they're employed, they get the wage. Tips should have no bearing. You're paid the minimum wage because employers now have the right, legally, to hold the tips and distribute them as they choose or not. So there is no guarantee from any of the restaurateurs as to what they do with the tips. As to unions, why should they be exempt? Indentured servitude went out with slavery, and that's exactly what that is, indentured servitude. You're going to join the union, and we're going to tell you that we're going to bargain away your right to minimum wage so we can have a union in a business. That's unacceptable, and I hope you will consider that seriously. As to litigation and arbitration, we have two very experienced litigators on the bench and one sitting by me. You know from your experience that the only fair thing is mediation, or anything other than that does not preclude an employee from suing. So binding arbitration is horrific, and I've been involved in that. It doesn't work well for anybody. Finally, I'd like you to consider the notion of how you will enforce whatever ordinance you choose. And so I think you'll look long and hard at some of these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Silver.
Hello. My name is Saul Grotman. I'm the owner of Cafe LaHaye on East Napa Street. And although I don't claim to speak for all of them, I do represent one of 23 restaurants in and around the plaza. And let me repeat what I stated at the last meeting. I'm not opposed to a $15 minimum wage. However, I do believe that rushing this 3 years ahead of the state's legislation will prove financially harmful to our employees. I've spent 23 years building the business model of this Cafe LaHaye, and I'm very proud of what we as a team have built. It would sadden me to find it necessary to change what it represents today. No one of our kitchen staff earns less than $15 an hour. Our servers earn minimum wage in addition to an average of $45 to $60 an hour in gratuities. I'd like to quote Mr. Bennett's statement in last Friday's paper. And I quote, "Most restaurant workers are what we call the working poor," he told the Index Tribune this week, citing statistics that show full-time restaurants workers typically make just north of $20,000 a year. I have two W-2s from 2018 here. One represents a server who works 50 to 18 hours a week with tips of $40,613. Another one with a server who works 18 to 20 hours a week, maximum $48,494 in tips, credit card tips. Now, mind you, you said restaurants don't say what they do. We do not collect the tips. I'm 99% credit card. I write a check every day to pay those tips to the servers, which I pay 3% out of my pocket or my profit for, okay? And the servers actually tip out 20% to the bus or 10% to the kitchen. So everybody is tipped in the business. Labor cost is already north of 42% in my restaurant, $15 an hour for tipped employees in my restaurant will result in a 25% increase in labor, not including the upwards of 15% in payroll tax and workers' comp insurance for 50% of my staff. I'm going to have to read faster now. I apologize. These services will have hours cut and some shifts eliminated, resulting in a loss of income, not an increase. Their paychecks are already $0 due to the federal and state tax on their tips. In addition to these costs, all our costs continue to escalate. After the fires of 2017, my liability insurance increased 45%, rent increases annually based on the CPI, and food costs have spiked over the years as well. I'll quickly say, Mayor Harrington and Vice Mayor Harvey, thank you. When you graciously agreed to meet with our group of business owners, speaking for your subcommittee, you stated this is going to happen anyway. I hope that the other 3 members of the council see the difficulty this ordinance will place on small businesses and vote contrary to your statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sandra Bernstein, the girl in the fig, 475 Patton Street. This has just been an interesting learning experience from all different ways, like different look into city politics, the way Sonoma feels as a community right now. I think things are changing. In the 22 years that we've been in business, we also, all of our non-tipped employees make at least $15 an hour. I don't have any issue with the minimum wage, whether we're already there. Our contention is being able to pay the difference to our serving staff, because that money should be going to our kitchen staff. And so we could probably produce another couple dozen W-2s as well with those kind of salaries. And like I said, I care so much about our staff. We've got over 200 people. They are like family. We really do care for them. You know, when the fires came, we jumped in. Our staff jumped in. We fed thousands of meals a week to the city, to people that were evacuated, to the firefighters. We didn't ask for reimbursement to be paid back for all the food that we used. The chefs all came together. The restaurants came together. Nobody's really listening to what we're saying. We're not saying we don't want to take care of our people. If we don't take care of our people, they're not going to stay with us. I have 15 anniversaries this month for a total of over 80 years with our company, with 15 different people. These are people that celebrate with us year after year, that they want to work with us, that, you know, we're not an unfair, we feed them, take care of them, we celebrate them. And I appreciate what North Bay Justice, I appreciate all the things you're saying. I don't know where the numbers are coming from. No one has asked us for our numbers. 1.8% is not a realistic number. I don't know where they're coming from. No one is asking us. Anyway, I wish that we weren't misdirected about the tip credit a couple weeks ago when we were in this meeting. It would have been nice for someone to pick up the phone and say, hey, we found out about that information. It's not legal in California. That would have been great. We could have stopped fighting for something that wasn't even allowed to have. It was a waste of time. So anyway, I also hope that I think we should be above the state. I think $1.50 above the state is going to be a little bit tough. Anyway.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Megan Mall, 835 Knight Street, Sonoma. I'm part of the Red Grape family here in town. I just want to start off by saying that my parents started this business 17 years ago with pretty much, you know, two intentions. And to open a business is obviously a dream, but the two intentions were to, one, give back to the community, and two, to be able to employ people in the local economy to help our local economy. You know, like our fellow mom and pop restaurant stores, we aren't against the minimum wage. We all pay our employees more because it self-regulates. We love our employees. I just want you as a council to remember what this town is. We are a very small town. A lot of these members here have given back to our community in a whole. I'm worried if we do something like this too fast, too hard, we'll see the domino effect to our nonprofits and to people that really need this. So that's all I'm really asking, and I appreciate what you're doing, but you're also comparing us to big box stores as well. So we have to please remember about the community members here in our town that are making a difference in our community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington and the members of the council. I'm James Cribb, co-owner of Sonoma Dog Camp, 1061 Broadway. First, I want to give a big shout out, after all this negative rhetoric, to our great restaurateurs in this town, because they are really, truly decent people. And I don't know who some of these people are talking about, because they're not the people that I know. I want to piggyback on something that Mark brought up, and it's an issue that I know my wife and I have raised with you before. And that's our approach to total compensation. And it seems from what he said that it's actually a legitimate consideration in what you're considering. You know, one thing we brought to our business, it was our first entrepreneurial effort, but we'd been in the corporate world for numbers of years, and the idea of total compensation was something that was stressed frequently. And that's the idea that you use other things besides just salary and wages to compensate your employees. When we began, of course, we had a competitive wage. Over the years, we started at the beginning with just medical. We've since added dental, vision, life insurance, child care, and other benefits to our employees. Those benefits have a real value, an actual dollar value to someone. That's money they're not spending out of their own pocket. And it has a cost to us as a business, but we're free to do that and welcome to do that because that's what keeps our employees employed with us. You know, we're the relative new kid at 15 years this coming June, but we're pretty proud that over half our employees have been with us 10 years or more. And those employees were all graduates of Sonoma Valley High School or in Sonoma Valley High School when they started to work for us. They've continued to work for us, and now they're raising families in Sonoma. And part of their ability to do that is through the wages and the benefits that we provide them. So we believe when an employer is allowed to match the benefits that they give to the needs of their employees, that works better for both sides. So we agree the cost of living here is much higher. And so, you know, your proposal from the subcommittee is to put us about $1.50 an hour ahead. We usually spend $3 to $8 more per hour on the benefits packages that we offer our employees. And our proposal is to allow that to be part of the credit that an employer would receive towards that higher wage, as Mark mentioned some other communities have. So we strongly encourage you to consider that as part of your view that you look at the total compensation an employee receives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again, Fred Allebach at 19550 8th Street East. I'd like to stand in support of the Jobs with Justice template ordinance proposal for the number one decision point, and I would also support the labor carve-out and the cost of living adjustment. The slide there says no more than 3.5. I thought it was 3.3, but I would stand in support of the highest cost of living adjustment possible. I know we've talked in town before in different forums about this town would be great if the tourism industry could pay out to the workers so that it would be sustainable. And so all this stuff about affordable housing and people being displaced, if businesses can't pay, who will? I mean, are we just going to surrender to being unsustainable and having a kind of class of workers that can't afford to live here? That's and I'm not here to say anything bad about anybody, because I think everyone's good people, and so I'm not up here to demean any other folks, but I think that that's important to take into account, that if we want Sonoma to be sustainable, it has to pay out for the people who are working here. So I support those three things that I said, and I'd also like to point out that in the Hidden in Plain Sight study and also the Department of Water Resources Disadvantaged Community Census Tract overlay, it shows that in the Springs you have the El Verano area, the annual income average is $40,000. Fetters Hot Springs, $39,000. Boys Hot Springs, $41,000. Boys Hot Springs adjacent block group, $39,000. Another Boys Census Tract, $40,000. Glen Ellen's, $48,000. Temelec is $40,000. So you have in the Hidden in Plain Sight study, basically you showed a very wealthy community, and then the service workers who were making less. The area median income for a two-person household is I think $68,000, and four-person is $83,000. So these people are making half of that, and so these are the people who work in the service industry, and that's just, you know, that says it. These are local studies. Those are the numbers that say what's happening here. Hidden in Plain Sight study and the Jobs with Justice State of Working Sonoma. Those are the stats that says from the labor standpoint. So, and then I'd also like to say that, you know, personally, about all I do is volunteer. So, I mean, I couldn't serve everybody during the fires, but that's about all I do. And I worked in Texas to help rebuild an arson-burned church in 1996, and I was over there for 5 months. And so that's what I do, and we're all good people, and I'm here to support the little guy. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred.
Hi, Sam Morphy, 472 2nd Street East, Mary Harrington, council and staff. I'm just here to address the one thing that hasn't been addressed. In the last 3 years, we've sustained a 41% increase in the minimum wage. I can tell you my labor in that time has gone up 15%, not 1.5%. I'm sure my food prices are equivalent. And to sustain an immediate jump to 15 by next year is going to be very hurtful to our regular customers, who most are on fixed income. I don't know where they're getting the numbers from, but they're not right. We are taking a gamble because neither side knows what's this going to do to the city of Sonoma. And it's going to be a big gamble. And I hope you're ready for it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Steve Page, 1219 Apple Tree Court, Sonoma. I just want to speak up on behalf of my friends in the restaurant business. I've lived here 28 years. I remember when Della Santina opened, and a lot of the people that work and take care of customers at Della Santina are the same ones that were there when they opened, I don't know, 25 or how many years ago it was. These employees are not, if you go to the Red Grape, you see the same thing. These are not abused employees in my mind. I also, $15 an hour, we don't pay anyone less than $15 an hour in our business. Frankly, I don't know how some of the people that work for us make it at that amount. It is definitely a very challenging, very expensive community to live in. But I do want to address something that just in the conversations I've had with some of my friends in the restaurant business, I think there is a problem of unintended consequences when you're looking at the issue with the servers. I understand Jeff Walters is a great attorney. I'm sure he's correct that the tip exemption or the tip credit is not legal. Is it possible that certain categories, like serving a restaurant, could simply be exempted or set at a lower potential minimum wage? Because the problem, as it's been described to me, is that if you raise the wage for the employees that are receiving the tips, you potentially end up costing, that ends up costing the employees in the back of the house. And so since if you look at the restaurants, this is an item that only is a factor for the city of Sonoma. The restaurants in this city, for the most part, are serving a very high-end customer who's leaving a lot of tips. And based on the few numbers that we've heard from some of the other restaurateurs, the servers are definitely doing far better than some of the back of the house folks. And I would hate to see something, if the tip credit is not possible, maybe there's a flat exemption for certain categories of workers, which allow you to potentially prevent that sort of imbalance. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment?
My name is John Toolsey. I work with Sandra Bernstein at the Girl in the Fig. I live at 660 Solano Avenue, just outside the city limits. I think my point is there's been a lot of good discussions here, and I'm proud of what we've created at the Girl in the Fig. I get up every day and I get to work with my best friends, and those aren't employees, those are family members, and they're the most important people to me outside of my wife and family. And I love these folks. And what I think is being missed is an opportunity. I don't think any of these proposals work. I think Sonoma is a community. I think Sonoma is unique. And I think what is unique is that you have advocates for labor who have a lot of wonderful things to say, and you have a willing group of restaurateurs. And what I don't think has happened is a true engagement. And I guess I don't understand the haste. I don't understand the rush. I don't understand why 2 meetings. There's so much more opportunity to do better. I think, what James was saying about total compensation makes a lot of sense. And what I would say to folks is it's not about minimum wage, it's about wage flexibility. And I do believe that I know in my workforce and the people that I work for who needs the money. And we try and allocate that. Over 50% of all of our revenues go to labor. We do not shy to pay. Those are our family members. But what the council is proposing is to tell us how we should pay and who we should pay. And I don't think you guys know better than us. I just don't. You may have the votes, as you said, Mayor, at the beginning of our meeting, but I don't know that you have the right votes. And so I'm not saying let's not move forward. I'm saying let's slow down and move forward the right way. And yes, you can put through an ordinance today, but why not 2 months from now when it could be right? Why not sit and engage further? I think you have a really good group of people, and I think there's a lot of commonality that could happen. And I would love to spend some time with Marty. I'd be open. I know we all would. I just think that this is something that's going to get checked off, and the people that really need the help aren't going to get the help. And maybe some folks will get to go home and pat themselves on the back. But is that really what we're trying to achieve here? Because that's not what we're trying to do in our restaurant. That's not what the people that I work with. We're trying to take care of our community. So I would hope that the council could continue this discussion and widen it. Thank you.
Thank you. And although you are entitled to make any public comment you would like, and you can continue to do that, I would ask all sides to try not to make personal disparagements. Thank you.
Hi, Rami Hensman, owner of Sweet Scoops Homemade Ice Cream, 408 First Street East in Sonoma. And I'd like exactly what John said. I think that Sonoma is unique. And that's when I first came here 4 years ago and started a business, that's the immediate thing that I noticed is it's unique. It's unique in its small business community and how community centered so many of us are. I think that's why a lot of us live here. We get to go out to eat and we see people working, and we greet people. We get to celebrate people's first birthdays, and we're part of the community. We show up to school dances. We donate 10% of our money that we make on those school dances back to the schools. We give $25 gift certificates for every single raffle that happens within the greater Sonoma area. And we really want to be a part of this community in the broad picture, the way we are currently able to. We provide, a lot of first-time employees with an opportunity to work and training, and we get to be a part of the community and donate our time and donate our products. But we also have to be able to exist in that way. One of my favorite parts about what we do is we have regular customers. We have this couple that comes in every Monday. They get a double scoop and a cup. And they asked the other day if we were going to have to raise our prices if minimum wage is increased. And I said, yes, we're we're going to have to. We sell $3 ice creams. There's just no way that we can exist with that. And they said, oh, this is our one treat that we that we give ourselves. We are on a fixed income. It's expensive to live in Sonoma. This is our one treat we get a week. And so the unintended consequences is a big piece of this. Yes, we're businesses and we will, figure out ways to be flexible, but I just really believe that we are all trying to do the right thing and do it well. And so I urge the council to take the time and to do some studies of Sonoma's population. What are the impacts to Sonoma? These studies that cite big cities impacts, that's not us. Sonoma is unique. That's why we're all up here. That's why we're here. And so I say, let's look at it and really come up with a solution and look at the high cost of living and how we can all work together.
Thank you.
Laura Havlick, Sign of the Bear, 435 First Street West. I really appreciate the council engaging deeply with challenging issues of dignity for all Sonomans and what that looks like. My concern is we have a straight retail store that fits a cookie cutter model here more than a lot of restaurants do. My concern is walking the plaza every day and looking at empty spaces and wondering about downstream provisions and how, if unintended consequences arise, what mechanisms are in play. In the extensive time you all devoted to previous discussions, I don't know how we missed it, but somehow we missed that tip credits were illegal until that was news on my radar this evening. I don't know how that was, really, because it's not my industry. But as we roll forward with working to make Sonoma a place that allows all of the wonderful people who are the gift of our time in this town the opportunity to live well, I hope that we find a way to also check that we get ahead of unintended consequences should they arise. Are there any provisions? I would love to hear if there are any provisions in play. I appreciate the council committee's more nuanced proposal. And I hope that we work hard to preserve what the fires so deeply taught us, the extraordinary nature of our town and community, because we're awfully grateful for everybody here.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Vince Albano, 1005 Ray Court, Sonoma. I'm trying not to get emotional. I'm a third generation owner of Mary's Pizza Shack. My grandmother started her business. She cared deeply about her employees. I'm not here on behalf of the company, because the companies will adapt and find ways to survive. I'm here for our staff. I agree with Sam, and I agree with union labor. We love to pay our people at our level $15 an hour or more. I'm concerned by paying the front of the house that kind of wage. It's going to jeopardize their jobs. I know there are studies, but I know our numbers, and the numbers don't add up. The studies numbers don't add up. They're worse than that. And if it goes as fast as you're considering, I'm just predicting we will be forced to lay people off and cut back hours. And I know you care about people. So this is about people, not just $15 an hour. And it's unfortunate that the tip credit can't apply. I'm just hoping there's something else that can be done, because it's about the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? All right. With that, I will close public comment. Oh, you can go. Come on. It's fine.
Oh, sorry. My name is Laura. I live at 527 Mariano Drive, Mariano. I have been thinking about this issue a lot, and I think that it's important to note that as far as tipped employees go, a lot of those tips are not being taxed. And I personally am really concerned about that. Just as far as, California-wide, countrywide, it's not just here. I think that raising the minimum wage is important because, I care about things like global warming and Social Security. And those are only things that, if more money is going to taxes, then there's more security there in Social Security. There's more money to help, governmental projects. And so it does concern me that a lot of, I don't want to just pinpoint on restaurants, but because there's hotels, there's many different, there's, consignment, I think that's actually probably tax, but typically people that are working and just being a waiter or something, they're not, I would question how many people that have tipped workers can show their tax returns and show exactly how much their employees are actually making, and not just show, the minimum wage that they're paying them, because they're saying how much they're making. But I just worry that that's not going to taxes. And, it is actually a really big concern right now. Global warming is really on the forefront. It is a concern for everyone. And it's another reason why I think that people should be making $15 an hour consistently or more. Really, I think one of the reasons why people are having a struggle, at least I'm just putting myself in other people's shoes, which is really hard to do because I've never been a business owner. But I think a reason why it may be hard to raise minimum wage to $15 an hour is because they're not going to $25 an hour, because those employees are still going to get tips, even though they're getting $15 an hour. And that's kind of a problem, right? Because the restaurant's not making more money, and yet they have to pay more. So clearly, I think that actually the restaurants, in my idea, maybe they should actually be paying, $25 an hour. I think that, that would be a more reasonable minimum wage, honestly. But so I think I'm out of time. So that's basically it.
All right. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to make a public comment? You can only make one. I'm sorry. You could do it afterwards. Anyone else want to make a public comment? No? All right. I will close public comment and I will bring it back to the council for discussion after we answer 2 questions. The first question I heard, which I can answer, is why didn't we say that a tip credit was not authorized? And I did, in preparing the staff report and working with our attorney, we were provided with the advice in preparation for this meeting that a tip credit was not legal in the state of California. I did share that with Mark Bodenhammer last week, and I don't know what the vehicle for sharing that with you was, but certainly we met with the restaurateurs and we're prepared to present that as a request at this meeting.
Yeah, and I really do want to say this is not something that we were aware of whatsoever when we met with all of you. We were not, meeting with you in bad faith and saying, yes, please bring us this tip credit thing, and knowing that it wasn't real. This is something that came up later, and we heard about last week.
And then the second question I heard was, can classes of employees be exempted? I think that was a question that was asked.
I think they can. There needs just to be a reasonable reason for doing that, and if there's justification for that, it can be done. I think so. I would certainly like to research to confirm my sort of off-the-cuff opinion about that, but I think so.
Okay. I think those are the only 2 questions I heard. Were there any others? No?
Could I ask what that question was about? I don't understand.
The question was, I think, for example, could you say that waiters and waitresses are not covered by our law and that it doesn't apply to them at all?
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, I will bring it back to the council for consideration, discussion. Is there anybody who'd like to start?
Well, I would like to go back to the comment.
Councilmember Cook?
I would like to go back to the comment that the attorney, because I think that is something that's very important in this discussion. Because when we look at a lot of businesses in town that the non-tipped doesn't seem to be an issue. It could even get me to go a little bit further than what the ad hoc has said, based on those facts, because my biggest concern is that I don't want anybody to lose a job, and I don't want anybody to lose a business. But with that said, I understand even at $15, $25 an hour, you're probably not going to be able to buy a house in Sonoma. I mean, that's the sad truth of it. But I think that the comment that was just said right there, and I appreciate everything that Jobs and Justice have done, the Chamber of Commerce and all the restaurateur and the ad hoc committee members. But what I just heard right there is the biggest dilemma in this. So maybe we are going a little too fast for a decision tonight. Just based on what I just heard from the attorney, I would not feel comfortable making a decision. I know that Petaluma, and I know that Santa Rosa, and I know that a lot of other cities are looking at this issue, that I would really like to do. When we joined Sonoma Clean Power 5 years ago, that's one thing that I did was I wanted to see the other cities go first to see how they were doing it. They have bigger staff. They, not saying that we don't have a great attorney. They do have more attorneys to speak on the issue, because for some reason I just don't understand how the numbers are skewed a little bit in the discussions. I know Sonoma's a little bit different. But when we're talking about somebody receiving compensation on the front of the house, and then we're hearing what's going on in the back of the house, that is a divide that I would like to see. I own a company. My supervisors make more than the laborers, but they're not by those percentages. I mean, those are huge percentages. And I actually own a company that is almost 100% labor-based. So that would really concern me. So I can talk just a little bit. It's like the tasting room ordinance that we passed about a month ago. There's a lot of unintended circumstances that I'll be bringing back to the council, because there's a lot of things happening behind the scene that we probably should have looked at that a little bit further. And I see that this is something that we probably should bring both sides back together. I would like to be part of the discussion, and I think the discussion tonight, I learned a lot more than just the information that I was given. I had to go out and find out what is the county of Sonoma doing. I would like to see this to be regional. I know the state is trying to do something right, and that is a big regional. If Sonoma does feel that we need to up our ante a little bit because it is Sonoma and it's a higher cost of living, what percent is that based upon? It just seems like we might be throwing numbers out here with unintended consequences. So with that said, I will not be voting tonight. I would like this meeting to be extended.
Councilmember Hunley?
So I have a lot of feelings about this tonight. It's interesting because I would say that the real, underlying reason that we want, and I would say need to do something of this nature in Sonoma, of having an enhanced minimum wage above the state minimum wage, is due to businesses that aren't in the room right now. And so it's, that's the really difficult, puzzle to figure out, is that the reason we have minimums is because that's the baseline, and that there are people out there that are not, that are paying the $11 an hour for the small business and the $12 an hour, and they will stick to whatever the lowest number that they can get to. And so, I don't share, some of the comments I read in the news of people being cynical about the restaurants and, anyone that would disagree with this. And I don't share that cynicism because, as some of you know, I tried out the food industry for 5 years and hung up my apron after that, because it's really difficult. And I think that the world is getting increasingly difficult for restaurants. And for a lot of small businesses. And I feel really sympathetic to that. But on the other hand, at the same time, there's so many people being squeezed out of Sonoma, and we don't even see it happening. And so I know that like your business that you put decades into, is the thought of something sort of knocking it off kilter and not knowing the future is really scary. But there's already been people that have had to give up the place that they're born, the place they thought they would be able to grow old in, and they've already left. So it's unfortunate because the system around us and everything, it's just everybody is feeling really squeezed. And despite my sympathy for the people who have built these businesses and how hard it is right now, I think that this is something that we have to do in Sonoma, because something's got to give. And even a $2 an hour boost for someone that is right now at the bare minimum, it makes a huge difference. I read an article recently that polling California, they were asking low income residents what was the thing that stressed them out the most, and they had a list of things including housing, which I figured it would have been that, but no, it was like a D, everything above. It was just the entire cost of living. Everything was just overwhelmingly expensive. So, and recognizing that Sonoma as a city, we have the highest cost of living in the entire county, and it's funny, did you mention Bakersfield? Because I was looking at Bakersfield yesterday, because I was thinking about our state minimum wage and how it's unfortunate in many ways that California is so big and it's so diverse and there's so many different economies. And so I looked it up, and Sonoma is 77% more expensive in its cost of living than Bakersfield. And if you took the $12 minimum wage right now and increased it by 77%, you would end up with $21.24, which that's a number that actually starts seeming like if someone got paid that, maybe it would be a little easier. Certainly not buying houses, but let's be honest, I can't buy a house, and I certainly have am above the minimum wage amount now. So I don't think it's I think housing is a big part of this discussion. There is no silver bullet solution to housing. Certainly higher wages is a tiny step towards that, but this is just about, everything being more expensive here. And so another thing I've been thinking about the timing of it, so Petaluma is taking this up, Santa Rosa is going to start tomorrow, and my ultimate goal is I want us to be in the same place as every other city in Sonoma County, and I want Sonoma County to also get on board. All 9 cities and the county, that's what needs to happen. But despite Marty's constant efforts for many years, it is just now gaining traction, and I'm proud that Sonoma's, heading towards this first, because I think we have a responsibility to do it, because quite frankly, our cost of living is more than Santa Rosa. So that being said, I think that I know sort of where I think we should end up. I think that the devil is in the details. As far as the restaurants, I think that certainty and being able to plan for things is a very important thing, and having enough time to, adjust your strategy and figure it out. So I don't want to drop anything on it too quickly. But I guess we'll talk about the schedule. And then there's a few things that that I think merit discussion, although I don't know how realistic they are. Because my thought with, someone brought up the city of Richmond, and they have their health benefits credit, and it's based on guidelines for qualifying health plans. I thought that was interesting. This one always ends up too complicated when I think it out, but it is the category of employees who would make a substantially higher wage with tips, like something like, average $25 an hour more per shift. Don't know if that would make it too hard to enforce. If it was something like that, it would be limited with a sunset. Actually, the health benefits would also be limited with a sunset. And then it is important for me that the small businesses have a separate schedule that is not quite as aggressive, probably $1 a year behind, and then I saw that there were some cities that do these. Even Berkeley had things related to the youth and training, and I still think about that and Teen Services Sonoma and what they do, and 15 and 16-year-olds that I think could have some unique opportunities. But so I'm I think that this is a hard topic, and I think it's going to be kind of bumpy, but I'm definitely interested in moving forward. And whatever ends up happening today, there's like still like several steps that would have to happen. Like it would come back with the ordinance, and we'd probably look at it, and you know, everything that we've learned in the meantime, probably just things around, and then you have to do a first reading, and then you have to do a second reading. So this isn't just tonight is the last time we will ever speak of this.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Agramani?
Yeah, thanks. So first of all, I'd like to congratulate everyone for being able to first sit through the steaming of the room. It got very hot. Now we're trying to freeze you out. So I'd like to congratulate you all for still being here. I know when I used to, I think you used to call it something, sitting out there before you got on the council. I would be hot. I thought I'm going to scream, and then they would cool down the room. It's still the same. So congratulations. You know, I was raised by a single mother. She had 4 children. I was the baby. And from 7 until I was 14, my mother always had 2 jobs. She worked in a factory where they put fireplace screens up. And then at night, she was a cocktail waitress. After she checked our homework and everything, but that was always that way, always. And still, I went to 11 schools before high school because we were evicted a lot. We still didn't have enough money. And it's interesting, you know, when you I always wondered when I was a child, why did we always leave at night? And it was because we were being evicted the next morning. So it was always interesting, and I think those are some of the things that I've grown up that helped me with this. I really congratulate the work you've done. It's very hard. There are still a lot of moving parts to this, and I hope we can get through some of those moving parts because there seems to be a disparity between the front of the house and back of the house, but I don't even know if that's true. I have no idea. I'd like to know more about that. And I would like to sort of slow down. I've looked at 2. Marty gave me 2. One, I think, was the proposal in Petaluma. I don't know whether it's been approved, and Daly City. And it's $1. We're sort of hung on to $1 increments. So I would like to put in my 2 cents and try to say, I would like to be to the $15 in 2023, but I would like to decrease the increments to possibly 75 cents, and maybe they increase as you get closer to $15.50. So that's something I'm looking at.
Question?
Yeah.
So you said 15 by 2023?
Yeah, that's the state.
Okay.
You'll be there. And so that's, I was just going through some numbers here. And I think it's admirable to want to be above the minimum wage, but I don't know if that's really going to help us, any of us, at all. But I mean, those are my opinions, and so that's all I'm talking about. Possibly decreasing the increments and going to the 15, but I don't know about being above it. And there are still some questions I have, so I don't know about the restaurants and all of that. So those are my opinions, but I appreciate the hard work because it's another committee I'm glad I wasn't on.
So just to clarify, and the city attorney can chime in if you like, the 15 by 2023 is a state law, and we don't
I
have,
know that.
I'm saying we don't have any right to reduce the speed of that.
Well, I don't, that's not what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, I
I'm talking about
misunderstood
the
you.
1650 of going
okay.
above it.
But do you support going to 1650?
No.
Okay. Vice Mayor Harvey?
This has been a really interesting process for me, and very illuminating, and at times emotional, and really kind of to the core of a lot of the things that I personally value. This town, labor, small businesses, all these things are at play here. And it's been fascinating, and just a very interesting ride, and I appreciate all the work that Amy Harrington has put into this with me, and I want to thank Jobs with Justice for the amount of work that they've put in, and I want to thank the business community as well for collaborating with us, and I appreciate everybody. So in thinking about this, I do completely agree with Councilmember Hundley that this is a necessary thing for us to do, and this will be cumbersome for businesses and will result in some price increases that may make it impossible for people to on fixed incomes to go into restaurants. But at the same time, there are people every day that are forced out of their homes because they can't afford rent and they can't afford to live in this community. And that is something that if we can stop that bleeding, I think that is extremely important. Another $4 in your pocket, $4 an hour in your pocket is about another $8,000 a year, which is a lot of money if you don't have, if you're making $11 an hour right now. It's a life-changing amount of money. It's more food on the table. It's the ability to occasionally buy your kid an ice cream if you have kids. It's the ability to, not worry that your shoes are worn out. You can afford another pair. There's so many studies that show that being poor is more expensive than being wealthy, because being poor means that you can't afford a nice pair of shoes. If you're wealthy, you can afford shoes that are going to last you for the next 8 years. Whereas if you're poor, you got to buy new ones every single year. And that ends up being more expensive. There are studies nationally that show that 75% of Americans couldn't come up with $500 in an emergency. And that means if your car tire blows out, now you're in debt. And maybe you didn't make it to work. And now you lost your job. And then you lost your house. And these are the real situations that members of our community are going through, and these are the stories that I think about when I think about this. I will say I'm compelled for reasons of enforcement and reasons of county unity that the Jobs with Justice proposal is worthy of consideration. Of strong consideration. I think the fact that they have put together a small business proposal that allows an additional year for less than 26 employees to go through is an additional bonus. I think that our proposal leaves more time for our small businesses, but arrives at a higher number. Although Jobs with Justice's CPI would bring them the same. But I am a little bit disappointed that large employers like Whole Foods, like Jack in the Box, like Taco Bell and the rest of them, Staples, will be on the same schedule as small businesses. And I think that that's a problem. I think that's a concern for me. As far as the city's enforcement, I don't know that we have the capacity as such a small city to do these enforcements. I think our staff is stressed as it is, and I have concerns about our capacity to actually fill that need in a real way. And that's what brings me back to the regional approach, because one would hope that eventually there would be some sort of JPA or something. Accepting servers, these kinds of questions, I think that's somewhat interesting. But a lot of people are talking about the difference between the front of house and back of house, and that's not going to change until the way that people in restaurants get paid changes. And there's examples in our own community of how this has changed. Sunflower Cafe, for instance, no longer accepts tips. They charge a 15% surcharge, and this is distributed amongst their staff. Compline in Napa does the same thing. I know people that work at Compline. They pay their employees $20 an hour, and then they put a 15% surcharge, which they distribute amongst the staff. And this may be the direction that restaurants go as minimum wage rise nationally. I mean, this is not just a California thing. You're going to have the state of Kentucky and North Dakota and South Dakota going to, I mean, I don't know, maybe those two haven't done it, but there's a national push for $15 an hour. And then you're going to have very small areas that are significantly less expensive than the city of Sonoma being at $15 an hour. So I'm fairly open to both of these proposals. As far as the CPI, I'm concerned about going with San Francisco and Oakland. The reason being is CPI is also chained to the cost of housing in many cases. And as we've seen with IPOs of Twitter and new IPOs of Lyft, and there's multiple ones on the way, I'm concerned that San Francisco and Oakland CPI is going to go higher. I guess there's a cap at 3.5, so I guess that's the protection from that. But I think that that's something that the council needs to discuss as well. I think we should chain to a CPI for sure. I think that we should have regular raises, but which CPI I think is a really important discussion to have. I guess that'll be the end of my comments for now, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess I want to start, of course, by saying that a tremendous amount of work has gone into this, and that both by the business community and labor, and also by city staff and the subcommittee, and now by the city council undertaking this matter. So it's not something we've taken lightly. I do think that it's important not to go slowly on this, because people need time to adjust their businesses and their rates. And so the longer we take, the shorter of a runway you would have to adjust to what the coming rates are. So I think it actually is better to tell people in advance when the changes are happening. And fundamentally, I think this is about there are people living in this community that are making $11 an hour, and they are living in poverty. And that is something that we as a city council have something we can do about. And it is not something I take lightly, and it is not something I'm going home to pat my back about. And I am not a professional politician. I am a probate attorney, but I am on this city council because I have the ability to do something that's better for this town. And I have a lot of concerns about people living in poverty. And so when you look at the proposal in terms of whether we listen to you or not, if you are a large employer with more than 25 employees, the proposal we have is that next year you pay 50 cents over the state minimum. 50 cents over. So not jumping to $5 an hour. And I actually think the Jobs with Justice proposal is fair, but given what we heard, we tried to come up with a reasonable proposal. So I do think it's really, there are financial implications and there's a lot of mechanics that go into it, but for me, it's fundamentally a moral question. And should we allow people to be suffering and living in poverty? And I think, is this the end all be all to helping people out of poverty? No, but it's a step and it's something we can do. And I think we should do it. And I think we're compelled to bring this forward and talk about it and talk about it in those terms. Because you know what, Madeline? I don't think that kids should have to be evicted in the middle of the night. I'm adamantly opposed to that. And if this helps even one kid not be evicted in the middle of the night, I'm proud to do it. And it's really tough. And a lot of people are going to hate us after this. And I understand that. And I'm willing to accept that in a small town because I think it's really, really important. So with that, how shall we proceed with regard to a motion?
Well, didn't you have in the beginning, you had listed out
so
categories you wanted to go through? Like, I didn't mention CPI. I personally like to keep it the same as our living wage ordinance.
Okay,
But,
so the first straw vote I wanted to take was on the proposal. So we have two proposals, and I think you alluded to a third, but the two proposals we have before us are the Jobs with Justice proposal and the subcommittee proposal. Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, I want to go back to what I'm saying because this is where matrix voting gets really difficult. I've been here for 6 years. I've seen it all. I've even heard things like, well, this will go back to a second reading, then it'll become final. You guys all won't be here at the second reading. That's what happened with the tasting rooms. Nobody showed up because tonight, the way it's written in the paper, it's a done deal. I don't know right now if I would go with the proposal of Jobs for Justice, or if I would go with what the ad hoc said, or based on what the attorney would say about this tip credits, because there's only so much money in the pot. And I think that everybody in this room would like to see that money flow down to the most underserved. And that's what I want. So we're talking about things that are very important. So matrix voting, all you're going to do is have Councilmember Cook, a big headline, voted no for the working class, when actually it's the opposite. Because through this whole thing, when I've been talking to Marty Bennett, who I think does a great job, and I've been talking to the Chamber of Commerce and different business owners around, I see the problems. I mean, CVS, I don't want to name off corporations like they're bad. It's just the fact that we need to raise that bar. And that bar is set by the state of California. And here in Sonoma, it can go higher based on what Jobs and Justice is saying. But then when you put into this business model with the restaurateurs and not knowing the answer to the question, I think it's unfair to everybody at this point to even vote. I would like to hear from the attorney to look into this. Because Vice Mayor Harvey, I liked what he said. I know what Sunflower Cafe is doing, and I've talked to a couple people about, different things. Do you stop the tips? Do you walk into the Black Bear and it has a big thing that says, all the restaurateurs in Sonoma, want to help our employees. So please do not tip them. Look at the bottom. You got a 18% surcharge. That surcharge goes directly to everybody who works there. So now you're not talking about the $60,000 figures from the front of the house and the $20,000 to $25,000 in the back of the house. Now what you're seeing is a balance. And that's what I want to do here tonight. But I don't have the tools to do that. And I don't want to make a headline that looks bad, especially because what Santa Rosa and Petaluma and hopefully the county of Sonoma will take a look at it. And if we want to be the model and the leader, this is our chance.
Okay. And with that said, I would still like to proceed tonight. And we can, if there's adjustments that can be made, they could be made at the next meeting when an ordinance is brought back to us. I think it's important to be clear about where we're headed. And if there are some changes, some nuances, that we could deal with those within the process of passing an ordinance. Councilmember Harvey.
Yeah, I would be nervous about the legality of us saying that you are mandated to have no tips in the city of Sonoma and you have to tip share and these kinds of things. I don't know that the city would have the capacity to do that. That may be a result in individual businesses of raising the minimum wage. And I think it's up to individual businesses to kind of decide what's right for them. But as far as making that a mandated issue, that would be something that I would be very concerned about doing. Because I mean, obviously Jeff can weigh in here, but I don't know that we even have the authority to pursue something like that.
Yeah, I'm doubtful that we do. The question was whether you could categorize certain employees in a particular way and exempt that category from the minimum wage requirement altogether. So, for example, could you place the people who are servers, the upfront, and exempt them from the city's minimum wage?
My assumption, though, would be that by doing that, we would make it less likely that people pursued a new model, right? If we're exempting tip servers from the minimum wage requirement, then we're going to make it less likely that people go towards the model that you're saying that you kind of support.
I'm not supporting it. All I'm saying is I want facts and figures. And earlier, when I was stating that I want to hear more from the attorney about how to answer that question about classification, I was just throwing in different ideas that can we can look into the legalities of these different things. I think that this is one of those items that you have to have a lot of free thinking. And yes, I mean, if we want to go through the whole matrix, I'm not saying that my colleagues on the council don't have that right. You have that right. But based on the fact that hopefully public hears that, come back to the second reading, come back, and these questions that we're asking right now, are very important, because I want to know that answer to that question.
Okay. So with that, do we have any motions? Councilmember Hundley.
Well, I just wanted to share the not to make everything complicated. So I'm trying to think about the sort of speed of which we're rolling this out. I have two suggestions to consider. The first, and it's hard to do. I wish we could like write it somewhere. So
do you want to write on the overhead? I think you can.
Well, let me just tell you what they are first. So, what my thought is that I don't want to make.
Can the city clerk
the
write while you're talking?
change?
Sorry. Could you write down what she's saying?
Sure.
Maybe on the chart.
Well, why don't she articulate what she wants to articulate? We'll see how we best deal with
See
it.
how it goes.
How about that?
Yeah, so I'm gonna I'll speak in terms of the large business amount, but I still think that I want a second level for smaller businesses. That's $1 less. But so I don't want things to immediately start before the end of the year or even at the end of the year. I wanted to give people a little bit of time to sort of get situated and start planning. The first one. And they kind of end up in the same place. So the first one, it would be the first increase would be June 1st, 2020. And that would go from 13, which is the new state, to 14. The next 2021 would be 15. And then the next year we would reconcile with the other cities. For small businesses, it would be $1 behind. The second one, which I like the most, has the first change. It basically has the change happening every 9 months starting after January 2020. So it would go January 2020 would be 13 per state, September 2020 would be 14, June 2021 would be 15, and then the following year, small businesses would get to 15, and then we'd look at reconciling. So that one, it has the longest delay before it starts, but because it's sort of a regular 9-month increase, which I got the idea from Madeline, it sort of ends up in kind of the same place.
Can we try and have that written down and shown on the projector?
Can you repeat it again?
Or if you have it written, maybe.
Is there like can I write it on a piece of paper and you can show it?
Right.
Can I have a pen? Thanks. You guys could do something else.
Why don't we just take a 2-minute break while we look at this? Thanks. Go. Councilmember Hundley, take it away.
So this is actually my second draft writing this. I was trying to my hardest to write it nicely. So it has the first increase starting in June 2020, and then it just goes up $1 for each side. So the places where, for example, the subcommittee, you guys end up at $16.50 in January 2023. So this one gets to $16 in June 2022. So it's slightly more aggressive. And suggestion B, which is my favorite at the moment, it has the first increase happening in September of next year. However, these are 9-month increments. So instead of just doing the state, which is going up a year between these, it's shaving 3 months off. So it's compressing each year to end up at 15 in June 2021, and then in March it's 16. And then on the right side, you see the small business column.
So differences here is that for large employers, with the council proposal, it would be in March of 2022, it would be at $15.50 for large employers and small employers, and for Rachel's proposal in March of 2022, it would be at $16 for large employees and at $15 for small employees.
And then the other big difference is that there's no the first change from state law happens in September of next year. So it comes
Instead of January.
Yeah, come January 1st, it'll be at the state level.
Can we see option A again? Okay, so
I kind of like them being the same month.
I think that it's helpful to have the minimum wage change at the same time as the state, although I think I can understand doing it at a different time in 2020. My only thought about that is, given that it's May of 2019, that there is plenty of time to figure it out. So, and that's one of the reasons to try and make some decisions as soon as possible so that people can be on notice about what the wage increases are. So I think for understanding by employees in particular, having one wage instead of the state and then the local and then the state and then the local seems more clear to me.
Well, once the local picks up, it's only local. Like, it would never switch back to state. It's only sort of, and I noticed, and I know the timing is strange having it all over the place, but I was reading a lot of other ordinances, and I think it's sort of getting to the place you want to be, and then you start being very regular. But that's, so June, started with that one because it's basically a little over a year from now. So it's like definitely heads up, but just the, not changing the January, I don't know. It seems like people have a little more runway to start making adjustments.
In some ways, this may be helpful. The June date may be slightly helpful to business owners just because it's right before busy season. So they take the wage hit, and then you have more people here in town, likely, which may be a benefit. And then the plan is that this is going to match up with with whatever the county is doing, basically. Whether that be Jobs with Justice or something else, we would try to link up with.
Well, I think there'd be a reconciliation at some point, but I also think that because we are first out the gate, people are going to be looking to us. And I was thinking about the cities who are going to be a few months behind us, what would be realistic for them to also do. So at some point, either in a few years, we do reconcile wherever they are, or if it's something that they could actually jump onto, we might all be on the same page from the beginning.
So then the Jobs with Justice proposal is that they're at 15 for large by 2020, so we would miss that, right?
Yeah, I totally understand their reasons for it, and it really, would be as beneficial as soon as possible, but I just can't do having an adjustment for employers starting in October of this year.
Oh, I don't.
And then
that's actually wasn't. Sorry, I wasn't clear about what I was.
Yeah, well, it's just
in terms of linking up with them.
Oh, how they get to it.
How do we get to linking
up with them? I just can't see how. Which I will find out when they have. So Petaluma is they've had their study session. They're moving forward. Santa Rosa's starting their study session. I mean, even if they had their ordinance out in the next 3 months, are they really going to have their first change? In 2 months from the day that it passes. I don't think it's going to happen. So I just think this would be a realistic schedule that everybody could join on.
Well,
And that's sort of what we were thinking as well, which is that given the timeline we're working under now, that and wanting to have a ramp up to the dollar amount, that a different schedule might be appropriate for us.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like, it's hard because I like that large employers are jumping up a little bit quicker. I think that that's good. I also like having an immediate jump for employees in 2020. I think that, well, I guess you have that too, but it's just in June rather than January. And then this would chain to CPI would be the idea.
Yeah, certainly at some point. I think it's hard to sort of imagine what happens after each one gets to 15 because I think it'll just depend on. And I looked up sort of where if 15 was, next year as the original goal was, where it would be with the CPI by 2023, and I think it'd be 1640 or something.
Would you support small businesses jumping to 16 in 2023? I mean, I like that we're getting to 1650. I mean, 50 cents is another $1,000 for an employee over a year.
Well, I mean, a question I have is, which I don't know if the state's ever doing this, if the small and large are ever going to be on the same page, or if there's always going to be a distinction between the two amounts. But whatever happens after this,
So the state goes to, the CPI will be the difference, because in 2022 for the state, it goes to 15 and then CPI for large. And then in 2023, it goes to 15 for small and then to CPI. So there'll always be a little delta based
well, then
on
it would
CPI.
make sense for it to go up to 16 during 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the delta shouldn't, I don't think the delta should be a full dollar necessarily. I mean, unless we could be like apples and oranges comparing businesses.
For sure, and that gets
Yeah.
it closer to
Apples,
where they would have been if it had been
And I think it is.
faster.
So it's not 1650, which I also would prefer, but it is sooner. So that in terms of the amount of wages received, there are more wages received sooner. Because you're receiving 14 instead of 1350, but actually it's only for half a year, so it's the same.
Yeah. I would just say, I get it. I would probably just go with ours. I would rather support our proposal, I think, if this was the choice, because really it's not that much different. I mean, the only difference here is that large employers get hit first. And at the end of the day, that the wage ends up at 16 rather than 1650. So
I think it's substantially similar though, because ours is at 1650 in 2023, and then this is June 2022, so there'll be a CPI increase for 2023. So it's substantially similar. I think the differences, practically speaking, are it starts later. So for large employers for June 2020, it's actually identical. It's just because 1350 sooner, 50 cents an hour for 6 months is the same as $1 for 6 months. So it's identical. And then there's a slower ramp for small businesses. And then after that, it is, there are higher wages because it's 14, 15, 16 instead of 1350, 1450, 1550.
and it's 1 year different really than Jobs with Justice, right? So this is going to 15 in 2021 versus 15 in 2020, and then 15 in 2022 versus 15 in 2021. And it's, I mean, June versus July. I mean, I guess ours is 1550 in 2022. So we would be really, I mean, with our proposal, we're only 3 months off of North Bay Jobs with Justice in terms of their small employers because they go in October. So ours is a little bit closer to Jobs with Justice.
If I went with you guys' schedule, are you going to add the small business reduced price? I just can't support a where it's going from basically what would be $12 next year to jumping up to $13.50. Like, it's that is quite a jump.
I hope people aren't paying $12. But I mean, that's assuming that people are paying the minimum wage, which I think many businesses would have a hard time attracting employees if that were true.
Well, but I'm just going to base it on the actual numbers because, as we heard today, there are many situations where people are paying a minimum. Maybe it's a small restaurant and they are paying $12. The employee gets far more in tips, but so going a $1.50 increase suddenly, like 7 months from now, I think is too severe.
Okay. Well, I can support either suggestion A or the proposal that we put forward. I think they are actually substantially similar. I mean, there's minor differences, but with regard to the amount of money, I think they're very similar. So I'm actually fine with either.
So you wouldn't consider adding a column, like a small
No,
business
I would.
column?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
to
would.
yours?
Mhm.
Okay, good.
I guess I kind of like where ours is currently at, but I want to vote for something tonight. I just want to point out I did a little math on a $4 an hour increase, and so at 18 hours a week of work, that's $3,754 per employee for the whole year. At 24 hours per week of work, it's $5,000 per employee per year. 30 hours a week, it's $6,200 dollars per year per employee. $7,500 per employee, and then that is like net increase in profits per week. To cover it would be $72 per week, $96 per week, $120, $144 per week per employee. So I
Are
don't know.
you calculating payroll taxes?
No, but this is that's true. That's true.
You better add
8%. Okay,
You better add
8%.
25% to
Okay.
35%,
Okay, fair
depending on the
enough.
workman's comp.
Fair enough. So I don't know. I think that the 250 isn't unreasonable, but I'm fine with going with Rachel's proposal if that's where majority wants to land.
Sure. So either is fine. I actually think if you look at the true numbers, they're substantially similar. So if somebody wants to make a motion, please do so.
Can I make sure I'm clear on Rachel's proposal? 2023, tell me what happens in 2023, June, for the large and what happens for the small.
2023, well, at that year, it depends on what the rest of the county is doing. Because I assume that there's going to be other states on board, and at some point I want to reconcile and join up where they are. So after each column gets to 15, what happens after, or gets to 16, what happens after that, I think it depends on where the rest of the county is. Because it might just be, like my first idea was sort of reconcile as long as it was within, like under a certain amount, but I'm not sure.
Oh, so for me, I would have to have it go to CPI after that.
Yeah,
I'd have to know that.
Drafting that kind of language would be very, very difficult.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, we can plan on a CPI increase after that.
Yeah, let's just do that. So,
Well-
2023, the large employers, it goes CPI. For small, it's $16. Then 2024, it goes CPI for the small.
Yes.
Okay. Motion?
And these are just straw votes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to make it? Did you want to just take a vote on who supports suggestion A then, or you wanted
Yeah.
a motion?
That would be the
Motion
Okay.
to approve.
So it could be just straw vote
Okay.
to approve
Okay.
a proposal A.
Okay, so could the clerk do a straw vote on the question of who supports suggestion A, which is before us now?
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte, Councilmember Cook,
I would want to look into declassification of tipped employees.
What is that vote? Is that no?
That's an abstain, or it's a no vote.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1.
And then the next question, so what we're going to do is, if you look at the chart on page 38 of the packet, I know it might be numbered differently, but we'll just go down the left-hand column, which says minimum wage policy components, and do straw votes on each of those. So For CPI adjustment, we have two options before us. There's the US CPI and capped at 3.5%, and then there's the interior Bay Area CPI, San Francisco, Oakland. There's a suggestion of no cap, and those are the two options we have before us. And so we do have a chart here which perhaps can be explained. The consumer price index averages. Would you like to go over that, Councilmember Harvey? We have passed these out?
Yeah, please do. So currently the state is at the U.S. city average, so it's basically all U.S. cities, which was, I guess this is from last year, 1.9% per year. There's also the option of the West CPI, which was at 2.4%, Western Class BC, or Western Region BC Class, which is cities with a lower than $2.5 million person population, which was 2.3 and 2.1% respectively. For the Western region, which includes basically the CPI or the increase in costs for Alaska, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and California, which is 2.6 and 2.5. And then San Francisco, Oakland, and Hayward, which only measures those cities, which was recently at 3.5%.
Okay, so
just to point out, our living wage ordinance follows the Bay Area region, San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward. Jobs with Justice has proposed San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward, and the state CPI follows the U.S. city average.
okay, so sorry. So I am going to propose that we take a straw vote on using the same CPI as the state. Can we get a roll call? Oh, sorry. The state.
U.S. city average. Which is U.S. city average. The state CPI uses U.S. city average, so national CPI.
Or would you like to have discussion about it? Hold off on the vote.
Maybe you could explain your rationale again, because my thought is to stay with what we're using for our own living wage unless we're going to change our living wage to only be using the same. But, part of the problem that we have is because we live in a region that is uniquely impacted. So, I tend to go for the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward, but also understanding that it's going to be several years before this thing is implemented, and I think that we have time to watch the trends and see what happens. But I think that the statewide or U.S. city average it seems to defeat the purpose of it.
So my original thinking was that what we wanted to do is create a minimum wage, which hopefully will be regional, that is higher than the state by a set amount that would continue to track higher than the state at that same percentage. So if the state is at 15, we're at $1.50 higher than the state. And if we use the same CPI as the state, then we would always be the same amount over the state. And so we're creating a special zone because it's so expensive here where we are at an ongoing set amount over the state. That was my thought. I'm open to persuasion on other things. I do think that although it is very expensive here, it's not as expensive as San Francisco and the core Bay Area. So I don't know. I think it is less expensive here than San Francisco in terms of the CPI. That was my thinking, but I'm open to discussion about it.
I think that California in general rises in cost higher on average than U.S. city average, so I would not support using U.S. city average just because I think that cost of living increases more in California than it does in the rest of the country. So I'd be open to most of the other ones. The question really isn't whether or not San Francisco is more expensive, it's whether or not it becomes more expensive each year quicker than Sonoma does. So it's already more expensive, but does that increase happen at a quicker rate than it does in the city of Sonoma? I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that. But considering that we are a city of less than 2.5 million people, the Western Region BC class makes sense to me, because these are cities in the Western Region of less than 2.5 million people population, and I think that that's more reflective of what we are. I think that there is a persuasive argument also that we are part of the Bay Area and should follow that CPI. So I'm a little bit torn, but I lean towards the Western Region BC class.
I think I would also support the Western Region BC class. Looking at the counties that they include in the San Francisco, Oakland, Hayward, it's Alameda, Contra Costa, Marin, San Francisco, San Mateo. So I would not put Sonoma in that category.
So are we looking at CPIW, or what are we looking at, 2.1 or 2.3?
I think we're looking at CPI-U probably.
BC 2.3. She's saying which one on here?
No, she's saying CPI-W or CPI-W of these two.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought you meant these. CPI-U. Okay. How about a straw vote on using the Western Region BC class CPI-U? Can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Henley?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte?
No.
Councilmember Cook?
No.
Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
The motion carries 3-2.
Okay. Our next item is covered employees, and this is the same proposal for the state and Jobs with Justice and ours, which is that the employee works in the city more than 2 hours weekly. Jeff, do you need us to do this one?
No, that's exactly correct. The state and virtually every ordinance I've reviewed establishing minimum wage uses this as a criteria. If you work 2 hours a week in the city, you're covered.
Great. And then on learners, could you explain to us what that is?
Yes, a learner is defined as an employee who during their first 160 hours of employment are working in an occupation which they have no previous similar or related experience. And both the North Bay Jobs for Justice, the state, and many of the ordinances throughout the Bay Area provide that for the first 160 hours, they're only required to be paid 85% of the required minimum wage. Thereafter, it bumps up to the full 100% of the minimum wage.
And this, so as stated, this is any age? Because I've also seen ordinances that have specifically referenced learners that are 15 and 16.
Exactly, and this is any age. And there are cities such as Richmond, for example, that carves out employees who are 15 to 21 years of age who are getting work experience, and those employees are actually exempt entirely from the minimum wage ordinance in Richmond, for example.
So one of the thoughts that I had, which I'm definitely open to talk about, would be to have a higher number of hours for the threshold for a specific class of young teenage learners, like twice as many hours or something. For 15 and 16-year-olds.
I would want to stick where the 85%, because there's a lot. I don't want to put any age on it. And the other thing is, one thing that if you make it too difficult, it costs more for the bookkeeper to try to figure out what's going on and different things. So if you just make it a cover, it's only the first 160 hours, and you never know. If somebody came out of rehab and they wanted to get a new job, and it was one of those, I wouldn't want them to not get that job based on, because of a learner being discriminated against. So my vote would be where it's at.
I am comfortable with the Jobs for Justice and the state. I'm comfortable with the current proposal.
We're talking about two issues here at the same time. One is the 2-hour minimum, the other one's learners. So let's take, if we could, just take the first.
Oh, I thought you didn't want to do the 2-hour minimum.
Oh, yeah, no.
We skipped that one.
Oh, I didn't know that you intended.
Oh,
to
okay,
skip
how about
it.
this? Does anybody object to the covered employees being 2 hours weekly? Say so now. No.
Okay, great.
So for learners, 85% of minimum wage for the first 60 hours, and then thereafter full minimum wage is fine for me.
Fine for me.
Okay, can we have a roll call on that?
Councilmember Henley,
No.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte,
Yes.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 4-1.
Okay. Exemptions. Mr. Walter.
Yes, the law actually does exempt other governmental agencies from the city's own minimum wage. There are a number of ordinances in the Bay Area that actually expressly call that out. I suggest that we do that here for clarification purposes. It's not essential, but I think given the fact that the school district has adopted its own wage criteria, there may be some confusion in the community as to which one applies to which. So it's really discretionary amongst the council. I'd recommend you include it.
So if we pass this minimum wage, would it apply to the school district?
No, it would not.
Oh, so why does it need to be called out?
Belts and suspenders.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, so it's not really a question then.
Not really.
Can I just ask?
Well, it is. If you want to call out, we'll leave it in. If you don't want to call out, it won't be included in the ordinance.
Does anyone object to specifically clarifying the state of the law, which is that that does not apply to other government agencies?
Yeah, and to be clear, the school district is higher than, is that 15 currently, right?
They've made that, yeah, they've made those policy changes. We also have the hospital healthcare district. I don't know where their wages are.
I would not exempt them. Yeah. So
I don't object to that.
nope. Does anyone object to including a specific statement about government agencies being exempt? No,
No.
it's fine. All right, collective bargaining contracts. So this is the idea that if you have a labor union, that they can agree, the union can agree to a contract where the person would make less than the minimum wage. And I don't support that. I think that nobody should be making less than the minimum wage. And I appreciate the difficulties with organizing the union and getting a first contract, but we need people to have certain wages. And with regard to total compensation, I think employees have the wherewithal to decide how they want to spend their dollars that they get in their pockets. And that might be on rent and it might be on healthcare, but I trust the independent thinking of the people receiving the wages to make those decisions for themselves if that's the decision. So I can't support that.
So who are we speaking of when we're talking about this collective bargaining?
Saying if you formed a union, that the union could negotiate with the employer and the workers could accept below the minimum wage in exchange for whatever other things they negotiated for.
I strongly support having the exception because I think that the reason that we need a minimum wage is because single workers have so little bargaining power when they go to have a job and they say they'd like to make $2 more and the person says no, go find another job. But if you're in a group of people and you have more power to be able to look at things more holistically, and I think that doing something like an adjustment for healthcare specifically, it's worth far more than the whatever deviation would be. And I think it's a very rare thing that happens. But I think that to encourage, because that could be, for our restaurants who would like to have different deals with their employees, just encourage them to organize. But I think that flexibility would be important.
I think union density and worker power is going to lead to more employees organized and stronger connections between employees. And I think this is going to help with a lot of issues in terms of affordable housing, all these things, to have more workers organized and aware. I am concerned about a union that would negotiate for wages lower than this because we're not even talking about living wages. But I think the point about a first contract is well taken, and I would hope that future contracts would raise that wage up. I'm kind of torn on this one. Yeah, I could support this.
Well, I just want to say that in my experience, worker power is built on workers coming together and saying what they're going to do, and that trading away as a principle, trading away receiving the minimum wage in exchange for the right to organize a union, which is what you're talking about, that the employer is not going to take you seriously unless you agree by starting off with takeaways I can't get behind it. And I don't support that for workers, and I don't think it's a good idea. And I am not anti-union, I am pro-union, and I'm totally all about organizing a union, but trading away the minimum wage in exchange for getting the union is a huge takeaway. And I'm not going to vote for it.
And I will say, in cases like healthcare, there are other options other than just decreasing wages. They could pay in to a healthcare system. These are other potential options for that as well. So I am very torn on this issue.
Well, there's never going to be a deal that they don't agree to. So I think it's within the workers' power to decide for themselves. And if it's not a good deal, then they wouldn't vote for it. But it's just just a card on the table that could be useful at some point.
Is this a term that we use?
Which one?
This is for the unions,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So it's not our term.
We could decide either everyone is subject to the minimum wage, or you can decide that certain people are not. And this would be deciding that people in unions, if they agree to it, don't have to be subject to the minimum wage, so they can make less than the minimum wage.
Well, I can't imagine that happening.
It's a request of labor that we include it.
It would only be if the members voted to accept a deal where it was. So
Well,
whatever
I
the
would get out
holistic
of the
thing would be
union
more
if they
value.
did that to me.
Well, it just if you voted for it, it means they were giving you something else that was like to you more valuable. I don't know what that is, but I just like giving the power to the people to make that decision for themselves.
Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, I wouldn't be supporting. I'd be voting no because of the on the minimum wage. If we're talking living wage or something, it would be a totally different story. But not based on the minimum. It's low enough.
Can we have a straw vote on the question of how to phrase the question on I'll just say not allowing a labor exemption. Oh, sorry, collective bargaining contracts not allowing an exception.
That's like a double negative. How
Sorry.
about exempting collective bargaining
Oh,
agreements?
thank you, John.
Who's in favor of exempting collective bargaining agreements?
Okay. Who is in favor or who is not in favor? Who is in favor?
Who's in favor of
Okay.
exempting?
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Henley.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
No.
Councilmember Agramonte.
No.
Councilmember Cook.
No.
Mayor Harrington.
No.
Thank you. The motion fails. Wait, fails?
4-1.
4-1.
Okay.
1-4.
We're getting there. So then with regard to the next item, we've already discussed that tip credit is not allowed. There are some additional ones we haven't talked about, lodging and food credits. I don't know if anybody's interested in discussing those.
Well, those are already, I think, something they can exempt from federal, correct? That's what I read.
I don't know about federal. I do know that there are a number
Or
of
in
cities' ordinances.
California, I should say. California as a state, I thought that both of those were.
I don't
Good credit. That's what I read.
I don't know. I know the issue came up because I was reviewing some ordinances from the South Bay, and a couple of the cities credited lodging and food. A couple of them did not.
Councilmember Cook?
I would not be supporting that.
Neither would I.
Nope.
Okay. On to.
Well, there's one that's not on the list that I would just like to put on the list for consideration would be some sort of healthcare credit like the city of Richmond has. And so theirs is for healthcare plans that meet their guidelines. Their credit is $1.50, but it could be anything. It could be $1 credit. I think that it'd be good to have it for a finite period of time. But I think that would allow employers who have implemented programs like that to have kind of a gentler transition because good for them. They're giving their employees health care.
Maybe I could expand on that. The credit in Richmond is for every $1.50 per hour spent by the employer on a health care plan per employee. The employer gets that $1.50 as a credit against the minimum wage. So if the employee, it was difficult for me to know whether or not, if the employer was paying, say, $5 per hour per employee for health care, whether the employer received the full $5 credit. I do not know. I put a call into the city attorney, and I've yet to receive a response.
No, I took that as to be a up to $1.50. But
I think you're right. I think
think
it only
there's-
goes, I think the maximum credit is $1.50 no matter how much the employer spends, as long as it's $1.50 per hour per employee. I think
Yeah.
you're right about that.
I mean, I was thinking in my head you know, it was just something that was kind of floating around out there that kind of struck me as something that might be worth discussing. I don't know exactly what it would look like, but if anyone's interested.
I mean, like, one of the primary things that I think people need is just more money in their pockets. And so, if other people wanted to talk, is everybody okay? Oh, so if somebody wanted to discuss it, I'd be happy to have further discussion on it, but I am comfortable not having one at this time. And I also think the rate that we're increasing is fairly modest, relatively speaking. How does anyone else feel about it?
I'm a no on that. I give them the cash.
I agree.
I don't know. Kind of too in the weeds for me to really know what's best for employees on. I don't have a strong opinion on that. I think healthcare is really expensive, and giving employees healthcare is a major benefit to them. But now this is kind of the problem without doing it through a union where they don't have a say in it. It's employers choosing for employees, and that makes me not support it.
Did you want us to have a straw vote on that?
Yes, please.
All right. The straw vote is on, should we include a credit for healthcare?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Abstain.
Councilmember Agramonte, Councilmember Cook,
No.
Mayor
Somebody.
Harrington.
No. The blonde. All right, next. City to prepare form of notice for posting at employer's place of business, employer to give notice to current and new employees. So basically, in the break room, you have to post a sign about what the minimum wage is. Should we prepare that? Does
Yes.
anyone object to us preparing it?
No.
Great.
Before we move on, at the bottom of the first page, there's the issue of commissions.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Can you go over that?
Yes, under state law and as proposed by the North Bay Jobs for Justice and in the council committee's proposal, commissions are essentially credited against the minimum wage. But to the extent a commission does not equal the minimum wage, then the employer needs to backfill to get to the minimum wage.
Great. Does anyone have any objections to the commission's language as Mr. Walter just described it? If so, yes. Everybody okay? Yes? Fine. Good. All right. So, thank you. Notices. Should the city prepare the notices? I think you can just go ahead and say. Fine? Okay. Councilmember Cook? Fine? Okay, great. Enforcement. So this is where we'll have to have the city attorney go through this. I think at this time, it is difficult for us as a small city to sign up to do enforcement when we can't do enforcement of other things. And some smoking and some other things. So private right of action is probably makes the most sense. And that later we could change that if other cities, if we did have like a JPA. But Jeff, can you go through what we have?
Certainly. The mayor has generally described the difference between Jobs for Justice proposal and the city's proposal. The city's proposal and the committee's proposal is there shall be no enforcement engaged in or performed by the city. It's left to the private employee or the employee's group or collective bargaining association to enforce the ordinance. And if those private suits are brought, our ordinance requires that the prevailing party be paid a lawyer's fees, back pay, interest, a $10 per day per person penalty. Every day that a minimum wage is not paid will trigger a $50 penalty for each employee who has not been paid for that day, plus treble damages or treble wages for any retaliation that an employer may commit against an employee. Jobs for Justice is advocating, as you know, for the city to include a provision that imposes an obligation on the city to investigate, receive complaints, investigate them, and prosecute them either administratively or civilly.
And just with regard to the effectiveness of this, I think because it specifically includes attorney's fees for the prevailing party, that people would be able to hire an attorney, because at the end of the day, the attorney isn't getting a percentage of the back wages. They're getting all attorney's fees, and that the proof in a wage and hour case is fairly straightforward, given that the person has a pay stub to show what they were paid. So.
I think, which makes total sense, but I think I'd like to, maybe we could talk to legal aid and work out some sort of deal so we can send people to them. They'll have information to advise people on their rights. Because most people, I would say, don't know that you can do a wage and hour case and not have to pay any money. I don't think people even know that's a thing. So if we could just have some relationship with them and make me feel better about not being involved. I also liked, I think it was Mr. Silver suggested having a mediation type facet to it. So maybe at some point we might have the capacity to not get involved with, investigating, but be able to be a neutral party.
And I like that idea because we're not labor. We're not the Department of Labor. We don't belong in that place. So I like your suggestion.
Just maybe one other point, if the city's preparing a form, if there is on the form, if there is for example, if legal aid, if that's a resource that could actually be listed on the form in a place where, questions or something folks could reach out to.
I think if we can provide some information, some direction on where people can go for this, I think that's extremely important, especially if the city does not have the capacity to be the enforcer, but I do think that pointing people in the right direction is very important. Is it possible to go above $50 per day per person?
It is.
Can we make it 100?
It can be.
I'd go to 100.
I would support that.
I would not support that.
Okay.
No.
Did you want us to have a clearer straw poll, or is that fine?
I think that we can, three of you are in support of increasing it to $100, two are not, so we'll include a $100 penalty in the ordinance.
Violation of the ordinance is not a crime. Does anyone object to that? No? Okay. City to receive, okay, no. Nope. City manager to promulgate regulations to implement ordinance. What does that mean?
That means the city.
Good job, Kathy. Get ready to promulgate them.
She might adopt, for example, administrative regulation that describes the kind of notice every year that's going to be published by the city, and it would include some information about legal aid, for example.
Oh, okay.
That would be the type of regulation that she could promulgate.
Yeah. In addition, we'd be updating the website, that kind of FAQs, that type of thing as well.
Sounds good to me. Any objections? No? Great. Are there any other items you'd like us to address?
No, thank you.
Thank you. With that, are there any, this item is closed. Thank you very much. Now, council member reports or comments? Anybody?
I have, go ahead, say it, Dave. Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say I went to the WAC this morning. It was a great meeting, and the Sonoma Water is what they call it now. They took our name, but Sonoma Water is the Sonoma County Water Agency, what it used to be. So if you do hear out there about Sonoma Water, that's it's them. We're part of that. It was a great meeting, just talking about some issues that I'll be bringing up. It's a late hour, so I won't bring up. There's a lot moving on, if you know about what's happening with the fisheries, or the hatcheries with the Ill River and the PG&E dams. But I'll speak about that next meeting.
Okay. Madeline?
Oh, sure. It's Fare Free Program, number 32 bus. Starting in June, we'll be able to there will be a shuttle that comes from Boy Springs to bring people to the parking lot at Adele Harrison. I think it's starting in June. And either you can drive to Adele Harrison and they'll shuttle you back and forth between Adele Harrison and the plaza, or you can just take that fare-free bus into Sonoma and go do that and take it home. So they're trying to adjust the schedules, and so there are a lot of things going on I'm really excited about. And I appreciate the council's support for this and the Board of Supervisors.
Wonderful. I have a little CASA Legislative Committee update for anybody who is not following it. So basically, it looks like Marin and Sonoma are mostly going to be exempted from some of the more dire aspects of CASA. But one interesting fact is that there may be development of fourplexes by right in residential neighborhoods. So in this, if as long as you could fit it in the same footprint as what's allowed by law on a single family dwelling, you can put in a fourplex with no parking.
Yikes.
Yeah. By
Is
right.
that the word harbinger that I?
I think so. Yeah. By right. So, and that is a compromise position apparently. Anyway. Councilmember Harvey. I'm Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yeah, whatever. I'm tired. I attended the League of California Cities Legislative Action Day. We witnessed I saw a press conference about SB 5, which will provide state funding for affordable housing. There was also an opportunity to see the compromise of SB 50, which exempted counties of under 250,000 people from by right development along transit lines, which is a major concern for a place like Cotati about CASA. I also met with Mark Levine and Bill Dodd. Mark Levine threw snacks at me, and I saw my doctor in Bill Dodd's office.
Thank you for that informative report.
Oh, this is mine.
City Manager.
That's funny.
Oh, that's true.
No decision making.
Yes, just briefly. So our Housing Town Hall, the next one is May 16th. This will be our Housing Experts Panel. We'll be back at Vintage House from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So I think we had almost 60 folks there last time, and hopefully bring a friend and come back out. We're also, staff's working on a memorial bench policy as well. This is one of the items that council asked us to work on for this quarter. I would like to reach out and have both Councilmember Agramonte and Councilmember Hunley work and meet with staff briefly on that before we bring it back to the full council. So there's some kind of a quick ad hoc based on just doing a pulse check on a few of the details of that policy. Farmers Market starts tomorrow, so be a ribbon cutting and lots of fun. And the community event kind of season is starting. As just a reminder, single-use plastics, which is one of the council's new policy. Again, we'll be educating and working with vendors out there. Farmers Market will be implementing. And then also, again, it is event season, so events are on our community calendar, and you can go to our website and see what's happening on the plaza, because we are starting the next season. That's it. Thank you.
I think at the Cinco de Mayo Sunday, right? Wow, there were a lot of water dispensers all over the place, so it was really nice.
They did it. Awesome.
Yeah, they even had some temporary ones.
City Attorney.
Good job, Blue Discount.
I don't have any comment tonight, no.
Okay. All right. With that, meeting's adjourned.
Lee, provide me her a little Schedule A, please.